used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting his front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its two front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger, every spring.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is
Very, very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. We keep the beef going. We keep the beef going during the break. I love my MG. I absolutely love him. I totally disagree with this idea. Like, we'll just have a general election every 5 minutes. I just don't think that is going to be the solution. The solution is we need to have a completely different way that our country is run, and it's not just like electing the next government. We really need to have more accountability, and I know you feel strongly about that as well. It's how we get it, isn't it, when it comes to this extraordinary story involving this Afghan cover-up, the super injunction and all of that. Look, welcome to the show, by the way. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, and whether you are listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is absolutely fabulous to have your company, as it always is. Don't forget, if you missed any of the show, you can go to my YouTube page. I have to remember to tell you this bit. We're called The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Easy to find on YouTube. You can hit subscribe, and then you will never miss a thing, you lucky, lucky things. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking more, obviously, about this Afghanistan cover-up, with thousands of Afghans who were secretly relocated to Britain after a Ministry of Defence data leak. They're now suing the government in a class action compensation case that threatens to cost taxpayers almost £1 billion. I have a funny feeling it will end up costing more than that, because these things always do. Now, 100,000 lives, we're told, were put at risk of Taliban death squads when their names were revealed in 2022 in the leak. Now, massive infighting between Tory ministers over who knew what when, who agreed, who didn't. Interesting to have Michael Gove, now Lord Gove, on the show yesterday, saying it was absolutely the right thing to do to keep this data leak quiet for all the years that it was kept quiet. Liz Truss hitting back at Ben Wallace hitting back at her. No one's heard from Grant Shapps, who apparently got the super injunction imposed. Who knows what is going on? I mean, they're trying to keep secrets from us. I don't even think they know what they're doing, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. That's the number to call. You can text on 87222. You can get in touch on X at Talk TV as well. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. And in particular, do you want to have your thoughts on this compensation claim, these legal actions? The MOD said they're going to fight these strongly, but yeah, good luck with that. Also, how did the lawyers know to get all these names together when we didn't know and MPs didn't know that this had actually happened? How did the lawyers know it had happened? Just say, apparently this is an open secret to everyone, apart from taxpayers and the people who represent us, who hold the government to account, which is MPs. Something fishy going on? I think we can agree there is. Well, give us a call. I want to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Also, Keir Starmer has suspended 4 left-wing Labour MPs over what they call persistent breaches of discipline. It's a desperate bid to wrestle back control over his backbenchers. The Prime Minister removed the whip from Rachel Maskell, who's been an MP for 10 years, led that welfare reform backlash. And also Brian Leishman, Neil Duncan-Jordan and Chris Hinchliffe as well, after their rebellion in the welfare vote. No, I'd never heard of the last 3 either. I wonder if Keir Starmer had, to be honest with you. And in another headache for BBC bosses, and another worry for all of us who expect the truth to be given on the BBC, a video has been shared of their head of news, Deborah Turness, telling staff that the Hamas government of Gaza and the terror organisation's military wing are different. That's not true, and I expect the head of news at the BBC to know that. Both, as one entity, are proscribed terrorist organisations. Maybe this explains why the BBC keeps getting this stuff so horribly wrong. Anyway, all of that coming up, so much more besides, loads of top guests, and they will include, of course, the wonderful Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
I bet you've been waiting all week to come and have your say on this after this news emerged on Tuesday lunchtime. Can I just have your reaction, first of all, to the data leak itself, that happening? And I'm sure our audience would love to hear your perspective on that. As a former senior military intelligence officer, might have some bearing on this. But also the super injunction and the cover-up for such length of time, given the fact the data leak was in 2022, the MOD found out about it in August 2023, and we've only just found out about it basically 2 years later. So before we get on to compensation and everything else?
Data leaks happen. You have to hold someone responsible, especially if it's sensitive or classified material, and we don't know that someone's been held responsible for leaking, whether it be by accident or deliberate.
It's Royal Marine, but we know he's still working in the MOD.
Almost certainly by accident, getting this data out there. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it's right and proper whenever something like that happens that you have a pause to assess the implications of it. So an injunction of some kind, stopping everyone talking about it, stopping it promulgating further until you can go, can we get it back? What are the implications? Yeah. So a short-term injunction, which was proposed, is right and proper. But how that turned into a super injunction and then hiding it from the Intelligence and Security Committee, who are responsible for overseeing things, and the cover-up that there has been with it is just shocking. And the numbers that they're talking about are just ridiculous.
So, I mean, the key thing here is like, and again, it's interesting, there's been some polling on this. Lots of media say it's outrageous that anyone didn't know. And there are lots of people who, in the media, who say, we should know about everything all the time. Well, look, we don't. We know that. No. And there are absolutely times when, there are things called D notices, which was originally used, which is basically for national security reasons, for safety reasons, you're not allowed to report this or that at this time. And I think most right-thinking people would understand that. Yeah. Apart from the fact that, by the way, these people were at risk from the Taliban from 2021. The data leak was in 2022. The MOD only found out about it, more than a year later in 2023. And the Taliban have since said, we knew about it in 2022. We had a copy of this list in 2020. So they'd already found out about it. And the MOD was so worried about people's safety, they didn't actually inform individual people that they were at risk. And by the way, we've left 70,000 of those 100,000 in Afghanistan. So obviously not that. And by the way, they are still alive 3 years after that data leak. So one would assume actually they're not particularly at risk. A lot of people, these were people who weren't vetted. These were people who said, I'd like a chance. Why not apply to the British government to have a chance to come to Britain and not get stuck in Afghanistan? I understand that, but this is a key thing. So it's the point at which they decided to extend it past the point when it was reasonable to worry about people's safety. Do you think then it was about reputational damage and a cover-up rather than about protecting lives?
Yes.
And what point did that happen? What point was the change, do you think?
I think the point in the change was, whenever the court case happened for the injunction, all of a sudden a super injunction somehow or other magic its way
It was been months down the line. Ben Wallace said that was under grant shaft.
I'm not a legal expert, but the judge, I don't think, will turn around and go, no, that's not an injunction which you've applied for. I'm going to give you a super injunction. Yeah. And if he had done that and the MOD lawyers thought that was wrong, they would have said, no, please, judge, we are not asking for a
exactly. So someone asked for it. It wasn't just chosen by the judge. And the judge is on record as having said, why are you not informing intelligence committee, security committee, which is a committee of very senior MPs and peers and forming, just people who are absolutely trusted with official secrets all the time and don't divulge them. And that would have provided some small measure of scrutiny, wouldn't it?
It would have done. And the Intelligence Security Committee, consist of, I know a number of them. They are used to handling sensitive material. They're used to not bringing everything out publicly, but it's their job to oversee things. They signed the Official Secret Act. They're not allowed to do it in the same way that ministers who say they didn't. Johnny Mercer, we know, is a former defence minister, veterans minister. He's written in the Telegraph yesterday that I knew about this. I objected to it. I thought it was terrible at the time. But he wasn't allowed to speak out until Tuesday. But here's the thing, though. So MPs weren't told, taxpayers certainly weren't told, even though 7 billion quid of our money was earmarked, and that was the number. Now, it's very unlikely to be 7 billion because they didn't bring everyone over. Yes. But again, it depends. How much we're going to be paying the people who have brought over? Are we paying for their housing forever? Are we paying their benefits forever? Family members? You can see how it could probably add up to that. But the key thing here is that so MPs didn't know and we didn't know, but journalists knew. I mean, the Mail and the Times were in hearings trying to get this super injunction overturned. We've got lawyers at Barings Law and also at Lee Day. And Lee Day involved in every compensation case. They've been trying to sue soldiers in Iraq for things for years and years. And they've signed up, thousands of people, 1,000+ people already saying, OK, so we've got a case, we can't tell you what it's about, but sign up because we reckon we're going to be able to get you money. They reckon they're going to, Barings Law alone reckon they're going to make 100 million, so 10%, a big whack of the money that's going to be paid out. How did those lawyers know about the case? And the newspaper editors know about the case, and everyone else knows about the case, apart from MPs and taxpayers, us a lot, paying for it all. Because the MOD are stupid, institutionally stupid. They think that by denying, delaying, obfuscating, deny, delay, obfuscate, repeat, everyone is then going to get bored and nothing's ever going to come out. And they think because we're the MOD, we can control. There are cases after cases after cases after cases where they do the same thing, and they don't realise that everyone knows it already. And what you should do, the standard thing is if there's a data breach, is you turn around and say, we've had a data breach, we're scoping the issue that there is with this, we'll bring all the details out and we'll inform those that are subject to it. There's no way were there 100,000 Afghans, or including their families, working for the British forces in Afghanistan.
We understand it was only 1,000, 2,000 max. So there are lots of people here on this list who, OK, a lot of these will be family members. And again, in Afghanistan, people have 4 or 5 kids. So you've got your wife, your kid probably. You've got quite a lot of people. But we haven't brought anything like that over here. We've brought a fraction of that number here. So who were all these people?
Well, that's one of the questions. And the other thing is, the risk doesn't disappear. The Taliban think in generations. I know someone who's a former member of Al Qaeda who was turning around saying that the Taliban are sitting whispering in everyone's ears, saying, "We know NATO are pulling out. Oh, villagers, you're either going to support them, and we're coming afterwards." Maybe 2 years, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, maybe 25 years, but we'll be back. And therefore, for the current government to turn around and go, we've suddenly assessed that there is no risk, there having been a large risk beforehand, and those that come out with their actual risk doesn't tally. There's a lot more just doesn't tally with this.
I think most people, and we fought quite hard on this show, we had a guy who worked as a translator for British forces and who's still stuck in Afghanistan and hiding with his wife and daughter. We called him Sammy on the show, and I've still been in touch with him in the last year. But we know there are lots of people who and people who've got documents showing they were absolutely worked for British forces and they were promised we will get you out, we'll get you safe. That they've not been allowed to come to this country, and yet these numbers of these people who've been allowed. There's the idea that anyone who fought for the Afghan army. Now, I understand the special forces is different. They were seen as very much, you're basically working with the British too, hand in hand. They were at risk.
Yes, but there's a problem with the special forces, and in particular an organisation called the Triples, which were the Afghan special forces. And this is part of the reason why, or probably part of the reason why this Royal Marine that accidentally released the data was dealing with it, because being dealt with in Headquarters Special Forces, they were trying to assess whether the Triples and their families could be brought out. And actually, there's another controversy that Special Forces in the UK had denied anyone in the Triples coming to this country, right. And that detail hasn't come out yet. And I wonder if the Intelligence Security Committee know the detail behind that. This raises so many more questions about the handling of everything under the last government, and the way it is being exposed, and the excuses that are coming out, and the political point scoring that's coming out of this government. Yeah,
because we had Keir Starmer making his first public statement at the beginning of PMQs yesterday and saying, the last government has a lot to answer.
It does.
Certainly in the statement from the Defence Secretary, John Healey, on Tuesday, apologies, it was less sort of party political, wasn't it? But he does tend to do this rather over-the-top, sort of pompous, sort of, sorrow not in anger thing. That's kind of John Healey's shtick,
yes,
isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's a style.
It's getting quite tedious already. There's a certain pomposity to it, I have to say. But Keir Starmer came out fighting on that. And it wasn't mentioned by Kemi Badenoch at PMQs because, of course, Tory hands all over this. A lot of people say, well, it's the Tories. My guess is Labour would have done exactly the same thing if they'd been in power. And any Prime Minister would have done this. And, this originally happened under Boris's watch, then Rishi Sunak's watch. I mean, various different defence secretaries. I think, a plague on all their houses for not telling us. But what do you make of the idea that people can be suing us? Because it seems to me, if your name was leaked and you've been able to come to this country as a result of that and make a new life here and not living under the Taliban, I'd say you're already sodding quids in. Lucky old you, your name was leaked, to the extent that I bet a lot of your neighbours, I bet certainly the daughters of your neighbours, I bet they wish their names had been leaked and they were at risk and they'd been brought over here to live in a free country where, their daughters can go to school and they're not forced to hide their faces and live behind, bars effectively in their own homes and not facing imminent death for saying the wrong thing. I'd have thought we've already compensated you well enough. You got a plane journey out of hell and you're living here. My guess you're probably not all multimillionaires making a net contribution to our country, in which case we're paying for you anyway. There's your compensation. If you're still in Afghanistan and you're suing for this, my guess is your life ain't that bad. You're not that worried about being identified because you are happy to have your name on that list. And it does seem to me that an awful lot of the people we brought over, people say, well, people were fighting alongside us. It seems to me you were fighting for your country. I'm not entirely sure we have a duty of care to everyone who we tried to help in Afghanistan to fight for their country. I mean, how many thousands of people do we have a duty of care to? Leaving aside, we know criminality among Afghanistan arrivals to this country is off the scale. It is off the scale compared to most other nationalities now. Most of those may well be legal boat arrivals rather than people who are working with our armed forces and others. But we know that at least one man and his family have been brought to this country, didn't work with our forces. All he did was threaten to reveal all this data on social media, and he's been allowed to come to this country. Well, I'm sure he's a fine, upstanding member of our society now. The reality on all of this is a cock-up from start to finish. Even the way they've tried to hide the cock-up, the way they have tried to, the way we're going to end up paying for the cock-up, and the way they've decided to sort of deal with it, everything from start to finish shows abject lack of openness, but also competence.
Oh, complete lack of competence in the MOD, because if they'd modelled this, they'd have known that the individuals haven't suddenly gone, we need to find a legal firm and we need to get together and get the legal firm to sue the MOD on behalf of us. The legal firms have gone, hey, there's an opportunity here, and have gone out and found these people themselves and employed investigators to do it.
And how have they found them if it was all secret?
Well, exactly. But everyone, lots of people had access to this list. The super injunction stopped anyone talking about it, but the legal firms, it doesn't stop them working on it.
They were saying, they told people, we can't tell you why, but this is the case.
But we're looking at this and brought them all in. But if the MOD had actually modelled the second and third order consequences of them delivering this cover-up, that have gone, and we're going to get our backside sued off.
Which is why they wanted to keep it quiet for so long. Sorry, I don't know why we're both coughing away here. Something's happened to the aircon. Who knows what? Someone's put a bag of dust in there, as far as I could. Apologies, as we choked to death. Apologies for that, guys. Before we go to break, and lots of your calls, funnily enough, already coming in. I want to ask about Keir Starmer. He suspended 4 Labour MPs. Rachel Maskell. I mean, she's been around for 10 years. She does again. The whole, I'm the Christian, I couldn't possibly allow disabled people to lose their benefits, argued against the welfare reform. 3 others no one has ever heard of, including, I think, Keir Starmer. Certainly not their local constituents. The argument they've given is that we were representing British people and Labour, particularly Labour voters and our constituents, in fighting against things like, the winter fuel cut and particularly on the welfare. They're not the only MPs. Some 47 Labour MPs, voted against even the government's utterly nonsense, nothing welfare reforms. But it does seem to me that Keir Starmer, if within a year of becoming Prime Minister you can't get your MPs to do your bidding, again, it wasn't a cut to disability benefit for disabled people. It was an attempt to stop people who are not disabled claiming disability benefit. The fact that he can't control his own MPs, the fact that he gave in to them suggests to me he actually thought that they were right. Otherwise, why did you give in, Prime Minister? And the fact that he can't get welfare reform through is pretty damning. But also, it seems to me, if he can't make the moral and economic argument, which is so strong and so clear and accepted by the British people, if not Labour lefty backbench MPs, that we need to reform the welfare state to make sure we can look after the people who need it and not anyone who thinks they're having a bad day on a Thursday morning and therefore can't work for the rest of their lives, then he's just not fit to be a leader.
If he can't convince his home team, how can he convince the country? And how do we know that he's thinking of things from the country's best interests? If he can't, you should be able to convince your home team. That should be the litmus test. If I can't convince them, we don't put it forward as a policy.
Yeah, Andrew, he's got a lot of spare MPs.
He has, but he's splitting them and he's creating a lot of enemies. And they now realise that they've got the power to turn around and say, no.
They have forced, not the opposition. The opposition has not forced any U-turns. They have forced U-turns. He's on the run from reform when it comes to anything to do with immigration, legal and illegal, and when it comes, and crime and the like. And when it comes to welfare reform, and like that, he's on the ropes from his own MPs. There is no direction coming from Labour other than this absolutely steely obsession with getting growth, which isn't working out so well, bearing in mind we saw inflation up to 3.7% yesterday and unemployment's now at 4.7%. It's all going terribly well. 10:22 is the time. We're going to take your calls up next. Lots more top guests coming up. We're also going to talk about the BBC executive Deborah Turness, who doesn't realise that the whole of Hamas is a proscribed terrorist group. She's the head of news at the BBC. I think this might help explain just how bad the news at the BBC is these days. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Is reform something you've thought about, JG?
Look, I've been a member of the Conservative Party generally for 18 years, my entire adult life, tragic as that may sound. I've never felt so despondent and disheartened with the Conservative Party, but having been a member for that long, seen the good, the bad and the ugly, I really want to believe that at some stage we're going to fully acknowledge our mistakes, completely understand and empathise why some of my former colleagues, like Jake Berry, have chosen to go to Reform UK. And of course, at times, I've looked at things and thought it could be quite tempting.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This
is Talk the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram is also still with us. 10:25 is the time. Let's get straight to calls. After thousands of Afghans named in the Ministry of Defence data leak are suing the government, we're told, for £1 billion in total in compensation. Guess who's going to be paying that? Yeah! You and me. Of course we are. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Lots of texts and tweets coming in as well. Michael says the government is now acting against the best interests of the British people. Ben says none of them should be allowed into the UK unless they agree not to the UK government. Oh, very good. No, I like that. Good point. Anyway, why do they need compensation? Exactly. Robert says, and of course we'll pay for it. A bonanza for all those lefty lawyers. I mean, particularly the second firm that's been named in this Lee Day. I mean, that's literally all they do is sue the government. That's all they do.
That $1 billion's legal fees.
Yeah, oh yeah, totally. Carl says, I love working each day to pay for people who don't lift a finger. Joey says, a total disgrace from the MOD employee to the MOD covering it up, to the Conservative Party getting an injunction, to Labour not telling the public until the judge lifted the injunction. Yeah, I have to say, I've got some question marks over Labour taking a year. That said, they did at least expose it. But of course they exposed it because it was done under a Tory government and they knew that the damage would be, and they're going to have to pay money, so eventually they're going to have to expose it. But I mean, you've got to criticise the people who did the cover-up in the first place rather than the people who exposed it. My main issue is, what else are we being lied to about? And John Healey, the Defence Secretary, is saying on Wednesday in the interviews, I'm not aware of any other injunctions. But he would have to say that. He would be legally required to say that. I bet there are loads of them, and we don't know anything about them. By the way, they're only being a super injunction once the paper's found out saying you can't publish it. So it's just stuff we haven't found out about yet. But given the cover-ups we've had over everything from the infected blood scandal to the post office scandal to every NHS cover-up, every single thing that's gone wrong, I think we can safely say we're being lied to on a minute-by-minute basis. So, and we're paying for the cost of it. Cover it up, just so you know. Again, happy Thursday, everybody. Let's go to Mark, who's in Lincolnshire. Mark, what do you want to say?
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning.
Morning, Doug. Yeah, what it is for me, they're not suing the British government, they're suing the British bloody people. You know, that's my beef here, because this has got some bloody nerve. You know, these people, to get them here, has cost us far more, because of the mistakes of one idiot in the civil service. It's costing us an absolute arm and a leg anyway. And then they've got the damn cheek to bloody sue the hell out of us. And as I say, all these compensation claims, whether it's this or other things, it's the British people you're suing. It's not the bloody British state you're suing. And it really riles me up. I mean, these Afghans, they should be told in no uncertain circumstances, and forgive me for saying this, but if you don't like it, all of a country, because people in this country have had enough of this. You know, absolutely sick and tired of it. Right,
I'm going to say there was some language there which meant that for Ofcom reasons we have to. But I understand the sentiment. So if it cut out a little bit, then people need to know. So basically, you were saying we can send you home if you don't like it here. I'm kind of that view. But again, I remember when this was all happening and we were airlifting people out. You know, we were campaigning really strongly. I mean, I felt really strongly that the British forces said we've made a promise to these people that they should be able to come here. They helped us. They were helping the British forces doing their job, and they took a risk, and we had a duty of care to them, and they'd been told they would be allowed to be given a safe passage, and we left a load of them behind, and then we're letting a load of other people come, which I just find utterly bizarre.
What was the vetting, Julia? This is another question that I have about this. You know, keep saying, these have been vetted. How have you vetted them? We're talking about Afghanistan, and a country notoriously in chaos for decades. It doesn't keep the kind of records that we would keep.
No, exactly.
So to me, the only vetting that you've done is probably some interview they've had with a military officer and how they've behaved with the forces on the ground when we were there.
Yeah.
That sounds like what the vetting is. It doesn't actually tell us anything about what they're actually like in their head or what they've been up to before we were there.
No, indeed. And again, we know people who've been in war zones can often be a threat later on in their lives. What do you reckon of what Ben messaged a little bit earlier? I just read it out. None of them should be allowed into the UK unless they agree not to sue the UK government.
Well, yeah, 100%. You know, at the end of the day, we're going to be on the hook anyway for their housing, their benefits, their NHS, everything else.
Yeah. No, I'm sure you'll find they're all multimillionaires working very, very hard and paying a fortune in tax. Is that not the rule of all immigrants now? Mark, thank you very much for that call. Quite angry about it. A lot of you are as well. Give us your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Let's talk to Saeed, who's in London. Saeed, you want to talk about Keir Starmer suspending these 4 MPs, most of whom we've never heard of, for basically being rebels and standing up to the government on various issues like welfare reform. What do you make of that story?
Yeah, look, I think it's quite an authoritarian behaviour. People have rebelled in the past. I mean, I think when Tony Blair won his sort of massive majority, there were lots of people, serial rebels like Tony Benn, Corbyn and many others. And they were always tolerated because the idea was that Labour has to be a broad church with all voices.
They weren't tolerated. They were despised by the Blair regime. Sometimes MPs end up being suspended. At the end of the day, if you're elected on the Labour ticket and you don't do what the Labour leader has said, although welfare reform, to be fair, wasn't in the manifesto, was it? Then if you rebel against the party line, you lose the party whip. They knew that was a risk. I'm amazed they haven't taken the whip from all 47 who voted against the government. My only issue with this is I don't know why they're punishing MPs who persuaded the government to change their policy. The government backtracked because of what the MPs did. In which case, aren't they saying those backbench MPs were right?
No, I agree. And I think, and the thing is that no Labour MP or no one voted Labour to put in swinging austerity cuts on the disabled or putting up pension fuel allowance and so many other things. And so this is not the reason why people voted for Labour after 14 years of Tory misrule. And the tragedy is that Starmer has abandoned each and every corner principle of the Labour movement. And that's why his popularity is plummeting.
But it's also why he got elected. Because the likes of Rachel Maskell wouldn't have got elected otherwise.
No, I think she got elected because the Tories fell apart, right? And that's why 72 Lib Dems also got elected. The Tories made such an absolute mess, and they were despised that Starmer won a very loveless victory with only 34% of the vote.
I know, but at the end of the day, there's no one stopping them sitting as MPs. They just don't get to keep the party whip, certainly for a period of time. Saeed, a really interesting call. Thank you so much. But he thinks this is going to backfire. Just some breaking news for you. I mean, just when you think things couldn't get any worse. You know how 16 and 17-year-olds, they're now trusted to have sex, and they can have, sex with someone of the same sex. That was banned for many years. Not allowed to buy cigarettes, not allowed to buy vapes, not allowed to buy a pint or a glass of wine in the pub. That would be illegal. And why? Well, because we don't really trust those people to make those decisions. Not allowed to get married. Not allowed to get married under the age of 18 either these days anymore. Required to stay in full-time educational training of some sort at the age of 16 and 17. However, as of the next election, as just confirmed in the news from the government today, 16 and 17-year-olds will be allowed to vote for the first time across the whole of the UK. This brings the whole country in line with Scottish and Welsh elections. We're going to let kids vote. Brilliant. And we know why they're doing this, because they think all those kids who are 16 and 17 will be listening to their lefty teachers and they'll be voting their way, which is interesting because something like 30 or 40% of youngsters now say they actually support reform. It may well end up backfiring on this government. I think this is genuinely insane. We don't let kids buy cigarettes or booze, without their fake ID, obviously, but we're going to let them vote over who runs the country. This is properly and utterly insane. And yes, I've met many a very bright 16 and 17-year-olds. I had one myself, but I still didn't think she should have the vote because she wasn't, oh, wait for it, an adult. by the way, you know what's next? It will be non-citizens getting the vote as well. And it will be for exactly the same reasons. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. This drives me up the wall. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Up next, going to talk to Trevor Kavanagh, former political editor of The Sun. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:36 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram with me. Just very quick reaction from you, Philip Ingram, to that news that 16 and 17-year-olds are going to be allowed to vote across the UK already in Scottish and Welsh elections. They're allowed to vote in those specific assemblies, but we're going to get the vote to decide who runs our country, even though they're kids. I find this mind-blowing.
16, 17-year-olds, you will vote for something that's radical because they think this is great. And they're so easy to be manipulated. Keir Starmer has now just set the conditions for the breakup of the United Kingdom. You know, it's that big. We will see the United Kingdom falling apart under this government if that happens.
Because the main thing is that young people don't vote very often.
Well, the
reason why loads of policies are geared towards like the grey voters because they turn out and vote in their droves.
Yes,
and young people don't.
What you'll find here is that there's going to be a massive campaign that is going to be run by manipulative little groups. Now include the teachers in this.
Oh,
who
teachers
tend
unions, massively,
exactly. Yeah. But to get the 16-year-olds out going and saying you're going to do your first vote.
Yeah.
You know, in Scotland and Wales, you get a larger percentage of the 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds voting for Plaid Cymru and SNP and the more radical parties. You know, he's just destroyed.
Oh God, they're all going to vote Green, aren't they? Good Lord.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Philip thinks. Love to know what you think. 0344 499 1000. Let's find out what Trevor Kavanagh, the former political editor of The Sun, thinks. Trevor, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Good morning, Julia.
I obviously was planning to start with Afghanistan, but that breaking news in the last 5-10 minutes, 16 and 17-year-olds going to be allowed to vote in UK-wide elections. What do you make of that decision?
Well, I agree with your previous speaker there. I think it is the beginning of the end of the breakup of Britain as we know it. But frankly, it's been underway for some time. It's been accelerated by the first year of the Labour government. But we are not living in the Britain that we were living in even only 5 years ago or 7 or 10 years ago. And it is going to change. It is changing before our very eyes. But the idea of giving these youngsters a vote is really handing not just votes to Labour, which they will frantically try to mop up, but also, as you say, to the Greens and to the other fringe parties with whom it may be that Labour has to make a coalition after the next government. So,
and we saw how well that worked out for the Germans when they did that.
Exactly. Coalitions are the tails that wag the dog, and they never get to a disciplined government. But that's the future, I fear, under Labour. But the thing is that it's all anti-Tory. Everything that's being done at the moment is to stop the Tories ever regaining power, or rather, not just the Tories, of course, the right wing, which is now led by Reform.
Well, that's the interesting thing, although actually there's quite a lot of evidence, and this is the case across mainland Europe as well, that actually support for reform is very strong among young people, something like 30 or 40% in some polls. And I think some teachers have been obviously absolutely horrified and probably blamed it all on Andrew Tate, as they do everything. That actually they may live to regret this, Labour.
Well, I think so, because I've got grandchildren who are between 16 and 22, and their views are remarkably right-wing, unprompted by me, which you might find interesting in itself. So that could backfire. I mean, these are kids with thoughts and views. They're fairly well-educated, and I think those who are less well-educated and perhaps with less defined views are not going to vote anyway. These are probably half of them will not use the mandate that they will have.
Yeah. Well, we're often told, aren't we need to get more young people to vote. Well, yeah, let's get the 18-year-olds to vote rather than making it low. I just think the argument is really, really simple. They're kids. So they can't vote. They're below the age of full criminal responsibility. They're not allowed to buy. We don't trust them to buy a pint, but they should be allowed to choose who runs this country, our tax rate, how the NHS is run, who should be the Prime Minister, which wars we should go and join. I mean, it's a nonsense. It's an absolute nonsense.
It is a nonsense. And if you were to speak to any of the 16, 17, and even 18 and 19-year-olds, many of them have no idea who they would vote for if they were given a chance. I mean, the responses are sort of duh. They do not have any fixed views about politicians or politics. No,
but I don't even care about, but even the ones who do, even the brightest 16-year-old who knows loads about politics, is really engaged. Brilliant, have your say, but you don't get to vote till you're an adult. I don't think this is complicated. But listen, I wonder if things would change in terms of our government if we did have the vote earlier. I want to get on to Afghanistan. You were political editor for many, many years. When I first came into the House of Commons, you were political editor of The Sun. I've said this before, you counted them in, you counted them out. Are you shocked or surprised in any way about this Afghanistan data leak and the cover-up and the length of the cover-up and the likelihood of massive compensation on all the costs? Does any of that shock you?
Frankly, Julia, I've lost the ability to be shocked anymore by what happens in national politics, whether it's under the Conservatives or under this shabby government, which pretends to have a political viewpoint, but wafts and wavers all over the place. They had an opportunity when they came into office, and indeed they were briefed before they came into office about all of this, the Afghan situation. They could have lifted that super injunction, which is an appalling attack on freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and indeed the right of the public to know vital information that affects them. And they did nothing from that very moment they won the election. So
but come on, we've got most of the blame on the Conservative Party. No, Trevor, most of the blame on this goes completely on the Conservative Party.
Of course it does, but the fact is it was continued.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly, again, if it was a few months while they were looking into it, fair enough. But we're talking about over a year. And let's face it, if the Labour Party had been in power when this had happened, they'd probably have done the same thing as the Tories have done. In terms of the compensation, what do you make of the idea that, again, so all these lawyers, at this Barings Law firm, Barings Law and at Lee Day, they apparently knew all about this. We know the Mail and the Times journalists knew about this. They were in court fighting against the super injunction. Seems like, the Taliban say they knew about it from 22 as well, before even the British government knew about it. Everyone knew about it, apart from MPs who could offer some scrutiny. Oh, and indeed, us poor taxpayers, who at one point were expected to pick up a bill for £7 billion. What do you make of the prospect of taxpayers having to fork out up to £1 billion, maybe even more, to compensate those who've been brought here because of that data breach?
Well, I must say, Julia, that listening to talk is like getting into a warm bath of common sense when you listen to some of your callers. And the guy who suggested that they should all have to sign a declaration before setting foot in this country that they will not sue the government for giving them liberty and freedom and the opportunity to live in a democratic country has nailed it, frankly. That should be the first thing that this government does, but it won't, simply because it would breach their human rights.
Oh, God, why didn't I think of that? Of course, absolutely. It is extraordinary, isn't it? And again, we're going to be we've already compensated them for it by giving them a life that's infinitely better than anything they'd have under the Taliban. Again, it does just beg a belief, but we'll be paying for it for years to come. In terms of what the government itself has been doing, dealing with their own problems created by them, Keir Starmer has decided to take the whip away from 4 Labour MPs. One of them is Rachel Maskell, who led some of the rebels over the welfare reforms. Others 3, no one's heard of them. I mean, I'm going to guess Keir Starmer wouldn't recognise them if he stood in a lift with them either. But they've been suspended from the Labour Party for breaches of discipline, apparently repeated. So does this show that Keir Starmer and the Prime Minister is being strong and he's got control, or does this show his fundamental weakness?
I think that when you come to Keir Starmer, you can't believe a word he says. I mean, he is not just, as he claims to be, ruthless, which is, I suppose, this is a sign of. He's unscrupulous. You were right a few moments ago when you said that he will probably reinstate that whip the moment that he needs their vote. So, this is just for showbiz. There is virtually no discipline that can be applied to this Labour government and its backbenchers because it is not a united party. It is broken up into small cults and subdivisions of ethnic and religious and socialist principles, which some people hold much dearer than holding power. So they're prepared to rebel. There'll be a lot more rebellions and a lot more, perhaps, of these not expulsions. You've got to make the point that these are not expulsions. No,
it's suspensions.
They're suspensions.
I have to say, I think it's a bit rich for these MPs to apparently be all sort of upset about it. And Rachel Maskell's been on the news saying, I don't know what I did wrong. It's like, you know the deal. If you vote against your government, you normally would get the whip suspended. He hasn't suspended everybody who voted against the government, even though he completely backtracked. So it says to me, this is a sign of weakness, not of strength. But just finally, there's no doubt a lot of criticism of Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, and his religious zealotry over net zero. Early in the week, he said that Tory MPs and Reform MPs who are opposed to net zero, climate deniers like myself, apparently, never denied there's a climate, that they are unpatriotic, and that he backed up a Met Office report that's saying that we're looking at extreme weather and how climate change is the biggest threat to the British way of life. Reform have responded by Richard Tice, the Deputy Leader, telling wind farm companies, you're getting subsidies now from the government. If and when we're elected the next election, you're not going to get any from us. There will be net zero subsidies. So think ahead whether you want to take the deal now, because it's going to cost you a lot more in the future. That's a fair, reasonable response, isn't it?
Well, I think this shows that you do have a muscular Reform Party with ideas and views and even policies which will have an effect on the very things that, apart from immigration, worry the public most, and in fact cost the public most, with these huge energy bills which are imposed upon them without any redress. I mean, they're not something that they can appeal against. They're imposed from top down. And they're doing absolutely nothing to change the problems of climate change. Yeah. In this country, a few windmills are not going to make any difference whatsoever to the problems of hot weather.
Exactly. Well, I know, but it's very difficult to have conversations involving facts because Ed Miliband gets upset, so we should stop doing that. Trevor Kavanagh, political editor, as was at The Sun. Always great to talk to you. 10:47 is the time. Up next, we are going to be talking about the BBC executive, the head of news, no less, who doesn't know that the Hamas government in Gaza is a proscribed terror organisation. Does this explain all of their Gaza coverage? I think it might do. We'll talk to a former Israeli government spokesman up next. This is Talk.
Is reform something you've thought about, JG?
Look, I've been a member of the Conservative Party, Jeremy, for 18 years, my entire adult life, tragic as that may sound. I've never felt so despondent and disheartened with the Conservative Party, but having been a member for that long, seen the good, the bad and the ugly, I really want to believe that at some stage we're going to fully acknowledge our mistakes, completely understand and empathise why some of my former colleagues, like Jake Berry, have chosen to go to Reform UK. And of course, at times, I've looked at things and thought it could be quite tempting.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Good to see me. That votes at 16 and 17 has absolutely broken me today. It really has. Absolutely insane policy. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. We'll get a guest on that a little bit later in the show. 0344 499 1000 votes at 16 across the UK is going to be what is the case at the next general election. Labour think that means they'll win it. Well, we'll see how that works out. Anyway, let's turn our attention to the BBC once again. We talked about them an awful lot, whether it's Greg Wallace, whether it's Bob Villan, whether it's their coverage of Gaza generally, which I consider to be completely institutionalised anti-Semitic. Well, maybe we've got an understanding of why that is the case now. After a video has emerged of the BBC's head of news, so someone you might think would know about, you know, newsy things. Her name is Deborah Turness, giving a talk to BBC staff in a Zoom meeting in which she seemed to justify that Gaza documentary that featured the son of a Hamas government minister as the narrator. Have a quick listen, and this is what she had to say.
I think it's really important that we are clear that Abdullah's father was a deputy agriculture minister and therefore, you know, was a member of the Hamas-run government, which is different to being part of the military wing of Hamas. And I think externally, it's often simplified that, you know, he was in Hamas, and I think it's an important point of detail that we need to continually remind people of the difference and of that connection.
Well, it's a point of detail that we do need to remind Deborah Turness, who's the head of BBC News, that actually the Hamas government is also a prescribed terrorist organisation in this country, in America and many of our allies. A very quick word from Philip Ingram on this, as a former senior intelligence officer. Does this surprise you that the head of BBC News doesn't know that Hamas as an entity is one big terrorist organisation?
Shocks me because it's very clear, but that explains why they haven't called them a terrorist organisation. And of course, you're using her logic. Hitler was only the head of the political wing of the Nazi Party.
And there you are. Because this is a fascist organisation. Well, look, let's talk about this with Elon Levy. He's a former Israeli government spokesman. He's now a host of Israel State of a Nation podcast. A very good morning to you, Elon.
Hi, Julia.
I mean, we've had non-stop conversations about the BBC's coverage of Israel and Gaza in the last couple of years. I have been absolutely appalled. I've spoken to senior executive about it, who absolutely denied there was any problem. And then, of course, we had, you know, shouting of death, death to the IDF, chanting, going out on live BBC iPlayer from Glastonbury. We had that Gaza documentary narrated by the son of a Hamas minister. Are you shocked in any way, concerned that the head of BBC News, the woman in charge of news at our national media broadcaster, doesn't know that the Hamas government ministers are also part of a prescribed terrorist organisation?
Yeah, well, thank God we have Talk TV, Julia, because the home of common sense would never tolerate anything quite so silly as trying to claim that some members of Hamas are terrorists and some aren't.
Some are the cuddly kind, some are the nice kind.
Exactly, they're the nice cuddly kind. I mean, just imagine trying to say he's not from the Al-Qaeda's terrorist wing, he's an Al-Qaeda diplomat, or actually he's a member of ISIS's professional civil service. Yeah. The whole of Hamas is a terrorist organization. It's not just about whether the British government prescribes Hamas as a terrorist organization. It's a terrorist organization because it is. Because the Gaza regime, the Hamas regime, spent 16 years booby-trapping Gaza to the eyeballs to prepare for war, building that network of military tunnels longer than the London Underground to hide their fighters, not let any civilians in, with the entrances in homes and schools and hospitals and mosques in order to bring on Gaza a destructive war. It's a terrorist group that murdered Israelis at a music festival, and we saw the utter fools at Glastonbury chanting death, death to the IDF. If the Hamas's political wing had marched into that festival, they might have faced death at their hands.
A point I remember making at the time, just about how insane it was. And that was about Kneecap, another band that was due to perform, but weren't live broadcast for the same concerns that ended up being obvious from Bob Villan. I mean, this is the extraordinary thing, though, that so many people in our national broadcast don't get this. But if the boss doesn't get it, you can see why, when she and among other senior staff saw, for instance, that Gaza documentary about life in Gaza, how to survive a war zone, it didn't ring any bells to her. Like, who is this kid? Have you paid the kid's family? Who is he? Now, there's been an internal report, which is a blatant, obvious whitewash about who knew what when, and was it did people ask the right questions? Were they told the truth or not? But even not knowing that this kid was the son of a Hamas terrorist, which is what his father is, you don't get to be a senior figure in the Hamas government unless you are a leading figure in the terrorist organisation that it's part of. Just watching it looked like a propaganda film anyway. It was really bizarre. And when I watched it, I'm thinking, how would anyone have let this go through who wasn't, frankly, a supporter of Hamas?
Look, it's absurd that this documentary was narrated by the son of a Hamas minister, but that's the least of the problems. That's missing the wood for the trees. The fact is, what you see from Gaza is what Hamas wants you to see, because there's no such thing as a free press in Gaza.
Well, hold on a minute. Organisations like the BBC say constantly, we apply to go, we want to go in, and the IDF won't let us go in.
And frankly, I think Israel is paying a price for not letting journalists in.
Should they be letting independent journalists in?
Well, the reason that Israel doesn't let journalists in is fear of exposing troop movements, and certainly fear of terrorists being used as terrorists using the journalists as human shields. It's important that the press have access, but not at the expense of the lives of Israeli soldiers they could be putting at risk. And Israel is paying a price in the international media for that decision to keep Israeli soldiers safe by not risking their
They
troop
are
movements being
absolutely using the propaganda war. And again, whenever we've had media following wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, actually largely they've been embedded with troops. And we've seen many journalists go in with the IDF. To Gaza, being allowed to go in briefly. Just finally, in terms of the coverage, and there's so much I want to get to, but we are short of time. In terms of the coverage, please do, reports day after day after day of IDF soldiers firing on innocent civilians, including children, killing them at humanitarian food stations. We've had a stampede and a crush, which we know, we're told, even that the organisers have said has killed people. How much should we believe about that, given there never seems to be any footage of anything?
You hit the point on the head. The only evidence we have is the claim of the Hamas authorities. And the reason
and aid agencies, they say it's happening too.
Well, except the aid agencies aren't the ones running the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation site. And the American organization that is giving food directly to people who need it and making sure that Hamas can't steal it is saying that Hamas armed agitators in the crowd provoked a stampede, that they murdered GHF workers, that they've put a bounty on American soldiers' heads because Hamas is trying to undermine this new mechanism to get aid directly to the people who need it. Why? Because Hamas wants to intercept the aid, sell it, tax it, and use that money to continue waging the war it started on October 7th, and the war it's still refusing to end.
OK, that's interesting to get that perspective. Elon Levy, thank you very much indeed. He's a former Israeli government spokesman, host of Israel State of a Nation podcast. Must get you back in the studio, Didier. Just get you back on for a longer conversation coming up very soon. Love to hear your thoughts on all of these topics. We talked so much about the BBC lately, about votes for children, because that's what they are, 16 and 17. They're still in school then, most of them. They're not allowed to buy a pint, not allowed to get married, not allowed to buy a vape even. But yeah, let's give them the vote. Let them decide who the next government of this country is. Well, that is what's been announced this morning. Also, just the general absurdity of people being brought here to safety from Afghanistan, then suing the government, you and I paying that bill as taxpayers after these people have been brought to safety after that data breach. I'd love to hear all your thoughts on all of this. Give us a call, 0244 499 1000. This is Talk.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Blimey.
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Julia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its two front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. My goodness, it's another lively one today with the breaking news. We've had about 16 and 17-year-olds are going to get the right to vote across the UK in UK-wide elections, already legal in Wales and Scotland for their elections, for their the Parliament, Scottish Parliament and Welsh Assembly. But no, we're going to give children the right to vote in general elections. Love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call on that. And whether you are listening on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, whether you are 16, 17 or a grown adult, it is great to have your company here at Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Don't forget, if you miss anything of the show, and it's been a rip-roaring show so far, you can go to my YouTube page. It's called The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. You can hit subscribe and then you'll never miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking more about the 16 and 17-year-olds voting, plus thousands of Afghans who were secretly relocated to Britain after a Ministry of Defence data leak exposed on Tuesday, finally. They're suing the government in a class action compensation case. It's raised to cost you and me as taxpayers almost £1 billion. Bet you anything it ends up costing more than that. 100,000 lives, we are told, were put at risk of Taliban death squads when their names were revealed in 2022 in the leak. But that super injunction stopped us finding out about it until Tuesday. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer has suspended 4 left-wing Labour MPs over persistent breaches of discipline in an attempt to wrestle back control over his backbenchers. But is it going to work? Plus, Reform UK has told Britain's biggest wind and solar developers it's going to scrap their green energy subsidies if they are elected to the next government. Basically, you're not getting any more money. So tough. Is it really worth making that investment when the money could dry up in 28, 29 when we get a general election? Plus, a High Court judge has ruled that the head of Northumbria Police, Chief Constable Vanessa Jardine, was wrong to allow uniformed officers to march under a progress flag promoting transgender ideology at a Pride march because it breaches their duty of impartiality. Funny that, things that you and I have been arguing all along, eh? Love to hear your thoughts on all the big topics, in particular about that Afghanistan compensation a case that's going to, well, number of cases that are going to be brought, but also your thoughts on the 16 and 17-year-olds having the vote. If you happen to be 16 and 17, I don't know, school's out, yeah, you're able to give us a call. Tell us why you think you should be allowed to vote or not allowed to vote. I would love to hear from you. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Send us a message on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Delighted to say that Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, is still with us in the studio. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Now, before we get on to Afghanistan, you are actually of the view, you just said to me in the break, that actually you think the 16 to 17-year-olds voting is rather linked to the story involving the Afghanistan super injunction and the data leak. Tell us why.
Yeah, because it's an attempt to take the Afghanistan super injunction and everything to do with it off the headlines by throwing out something else sensational.
Which we just did.
What's the logic behind it? Where's it come from? Where's been the build-up in the press?
Oh, no, there's definitely been a build. This is definitely something they've been planning to do.
Yes, but not for it to happen today.
Here's the thing. I'm not sure this damages this government because this is a cock-up and a conspiracy by the last government.
I think
and everyone's blaming the Tories. There's a reason why Kemi Badenoch didn't bring up in P&Qs and the Prime Minister did.
Yes, and the Tories are responsible for everything that went on and the reason why we're here. But it's taken a year of Labour to get to the position that they're in. I think if people start to delve into the detail behind it, who knew what beforehand and started to really analyse that, they kept it secret.
People also tend to just blame everybody. I mean, I'm always saying, plague on all your hands. There's anything that Labour does wrong. I think, well, we got into this mess because of the Tories, and we got into a lot of the mess the Tories were in because of the last Labour government, and you just can keep going back and back. I'm not sure voters put up with that. They want whoever's in charge right now to do the right thing. Let's talk about the 16 and 17-year-olds then, because this has announced that next general election will allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote for the first time, with apparently wide-ranging plans to modernise our democracy. Labour manifesto committed the party to doing this, so we knew it was going to happen. This is for parliamentary elections. This is in line with Scottish and Welsh elections. We always end up doing what they do. And 16-year-olds will be allowed to vote in those elections. Now, we know why the Scots and the Welsh push this forward. There's this view, Scottish nationalists massively, but also Labour Party in Wales as well, supported by Plaid Cymru, that the young people are more likely to vote on the left, more likely to vote for the radical parties. Not that Labour's a radical party, but they're more likely to vote certainly for the SNP, for independence movements. Greens will love this. This will do great for them because the green indoctrination that goes on in our schools. Do you think this is anything more than a cynical move? I mean, you think it's a dead cat to get us off the conversation of Afghanistan. But do you think this is just a cynical move, which is that Labour Party thinks that these people are going to vote for them, and that's why they're doing it?
Yep.
Okay, and moving on.
Jeremy Corbyn's new party is going to be a big winner out of this because a lot of 16, 17-year-olds love what Jeremy Corbyn was coming out with. Here's
another factor. We know that the birth rate among immigrant population of this country and first and second generation is way higher than the indigenous white European population, and indeed Afro-Caribbean population as well. We are seeing particularly among Muslims these huge growth rate in the number of Muslims population coming to here, and also in terms of the number of children, and something like 1 in 5 children who are going to be in British schools in the next 10 years, I think. So I can't remember the exact statistic, but something of that realm will be Muslim children. You are looking at a very large vote from a particular religious group in this country. Now, we know you're from Northern Ireland. We know that the demographics in Northern Ireland are moving towards a Catholic majority. There's already a Catholic majority. In Northern Ireland of the whole population. But as it moves, people move over 18, you could be more Catholics and Protestant voters. Is there a concern, actually, about having the voting age even younger, that you are affecting the demographics of the voting system? And we've already seen there are 5 MPs in Parliament who are, to all intents and purposes, MPs for Gaza. They're not MPs for their local constituencies. They never talk about their local constituencies. It's all about Gaza and Israel.
Well, if 16 and 17-year-olds want to vote in and talk to us, please make sure you've got a chaperone, because you're children, and we have to make sure that we don't manipulate you and abuse you, because 16 and 17-year-olds can be manipulated. Northern Ireland, it isn't Catholic Protestant. There's a lot of Catholics vote for unionist parties. There's some Protestants vote for
it's
nationalist
changed a lot
parties.
in the last 20 years.
It's always been like that. It's just misreported continuously. But 16 and 17-year-olds tend to vote for more radical parties on the left wing and on the right wing. The majority are more left than right.
Well, except we have seen across Europe that actually support for some of these supposed to told far right, but actually just right wing parties, not anti-migrant, anti-non-controlled mass immigration, which is the general viewpoint. But actually, we've seen massive support in the under 30s. And we've seen the growth of reforms appeal in teenagers and in people in their 20s. This may come back to bite Keir Starmer in his ample backside.
Well, it will, and our Parliament is unique in that under certain circumstances it allows non-British citizens, people who don't have a British passport, to be elected, to stand for and be elected as MPs. And when we're allowed, and therefore make laws that affect all British citizens. And some of them come from the more radical sides of I
just don't think that's
politics.
An unreasonable requirement. We've had non-British citizens before, but again, I know some of the things that the Remainers, the Keir Starmers and things were pushing for was it shouldn't just be British citizens who have votes and things, like the EU referendum, they were pushing for non-British citizens, EU citizens to have a say. It's like,
on whether we should send
if I went and lived in Germany, I don't think I should have a say. OK, European elections you're allowed to take part, but that's a different matter. But the idea that I should have a say, well, you live somewhere, so what? I'm not a citizen. That's the whole point of being a citizen. But the key thing here is, before the age of 18, look, we saw this, some very high-profile cases like Axel Rudiger-Barnett. Oh, you can't name someone because they're under 18. They can't get a whole life term if they're convicted of the most heinous crimes, killing children because they're under 18. You can't buy a pint. You can't go and buy a glass of Prosecco in a pub legally, or a bottle of wine in an off licence if you're under 18. You can't buy legally a vape. You can't buy a cigarette. You can't get married. That law changed a few years ago. Not even with permission of your parents. You can't get married under 18. You can serve in the army. You can sign up for the army, but you can't go on the front line. But you can have a say in how our country's run. I think that is insane.
It's completely insane.
You're either an adult or you're not. The key thing is to have a point where you are an adult and a point where you're not.
So maybe they change the definition when an adult is. So then whenever you get cases where that grey area where you've got a mature adult having a relationship with a child between 16 and 18, and people label them as paedophiles, maybe
but
things are going to change.
They're changing that. But again, at 17 you could drive because there are a lot of people who will need to have a car, and at 16 you're allowed legally to have sex and things like that. But I mean, there are reasons why
you can't buy a glue, you can't buy a pint, you can't. You get dealt with in a juvenile court because your brain is juvenile.
Because you're a kid. Because you're kids, well, you're not allowed to vote. I mean, one thing they also announced, they are going to be making changes to the voter ID rules, which is interesting, of course, because the Labour Party, you have to show ID to get into Labour Party conference. you have to show ID to get into any meeting of the Labour Party, but they don't think you should have to show ID to get to vote at an election. I mean, you have to show ID just to pick up a package from Amazon, for goodness sake. Of course.
Maybe we need national ID.
No. But there are loads of ID cards that are freely available that can be used by people who are over age, or people who, if you've got your passport, your other ID, but actually very few for younger people, and they're going to extend it to bank cards, which I think, given the amount of ID you have to show to get a bank account, I think is very reasonable. You need to make it easier. I'm in favour of compulsory voting. I would worry more about getting 18 to 24-year-olds who barely vote at all out voting rather than anything else. And I will never, ever, 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 ever change my mind. And I've got a very bright 18-year-old, and she was a very bright 16 and 17-year-old, and she probably knows more about politics, with the poor thing having to sit at the dinner table with me every night, than most adults. But I still don't think she should have had the vote until she was 18. And I don't know how she would vote. That's her business. I genuinely don't know how she would vote. But she shouldn't have had the vote until she was 18. End of discussion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you disagree with me, I'd love to hear from you. 0344 499 1000. And I know a lot of young people do disagree with me, because about 10 years ago, I wrote a piece for The Telegraph. I always forgot to mention this. About 10 years ago, I wrote this piece for The Telegraph about when this had come up, the Scottish moved to this, and saying that I didn't think that, for the same reasons I've just said, shouldn't be allowed to vote. And suddenly, out of the blue, a few months later, I'm getting so much abuse on social media, more than I normally get. And it was all about, and it was in very much lots of Scottish dialect, and it was quite difficult to even understand some of it. I couldn't work out what was going on until someone, and I'm talking about thousands of messages. Yep. Thousands of angry, abusive messages from apparently quite young people. I discovered that one of the Scottish higher exams had used my article in the Telegraph as the subject, as in like, this is a piece of argument. I don't know what the exam was. Discuss, disagree, explain why the writer is right or wrong, and I've literally got half of the 16 and 17-year-olds in Scotland absolutely hating my guts about arguing about why I thought they were too young and too thick to be allowed to vote. I mean, that said, the amount of abuse that was misspelled, I'm thinking I was definitely right. But yeah, I did get an apology for the exam board. I said, you could have warned me.
Oh, that's funny.
But anyway, that's what happened to me. Let's talk about Afghanistan. Because I wonder what the 16 and 17-year-olds would make of this. I mean, again, a lot of them probably wouldn't even remember. They're probably still watching Blue Peter, if it's still on, when we had the Afghan, the Kabul airlift just a few years ago. This data leak, we talked so much about this the last couple of days, but the super injunction, stop it. Now we know about compensation. 2 Commons committees are going to investigate, including the Defence Select Committee, but also what happened, what went wrong, data leak and super injunction, but also in terms of the amount of money. We're told £7 billion. That's a number that's bandied around repeatedly in the court case, which we weren't allowed to know were even happening, saying it would cost $7 billion. We're now told it will be $1 billion. Plus another billion, well, less than $1 billion, plus another $1 billion for compensation. But we've got the Public Accounts Committee wanting to look into this because it's your and my money. But we've got people who their names have been exposed. They're coming to this country. They've been brought to this country. They're now dealing with lawyers. Barings Law and Lee Day. Lee Day certainly have a lot of form on these sort of cases, suing the country. They're suing the MOD, but we're going to be the ones who foot the bill for compensation after they have been rescued from the hellhole that is Taliban-run Afghanistan. I'm sure it was pretty rubbish even before the Taliban came back into charge. And now they're going to sue us, and undoubtedly, knowing our courts, will win, and we'll be paying out £1 billion of British taxpayers' money to fund people for the compensation for the fact that we're now paying for them to be here. Their kids going to school here, getting healthcare here. No doubt we're paying for their housing. These people have come over sort of destitute, nothing. Probably many of them not even speaking English. These weren't necessarily all translators. And now we're paying for them double over. This is untenable, isn't it?
It's a farce, a complete farce from beginning to end. Leaks happen, an accident release the data, the individual should be held responsible. We don't know whether that's happened. It's right and proper that you have a period of time where you look to see what the implications are, but you then put the actions that you're legally supposed to under GDPR in informing the key individuals and the key authorities and all the rest of it. One of the key authorities here would have been the Intelligence and Security Committee of the House of Commons.
And they weren't on. At one point, the judge in these court proceedings that were kept completely secret did actually say, why are we not informing it? And they were told, well, they can't be seeing something this top secret, despite the fact they see things that top secret all the time.
Yeah. And it wouldn't have been top secret. And then you get the magic of an injunction application suddenly turning into a super injunction, even though that's not what the Ministry of Defence wanted, according to Ben Wallace, the then Secretary of State for Defence. And then it's kept secret for a number of years with people coming across and in tens of thousands. But there wasn't tens of thousands working for the British military in Afghanistan. Yeah. So we'll have to question what the logic is behind that.
That's the issue, is about the vetting. A lot of these people were people who just basically applied, and and the reason why this MOD official, it was Royal Marine, we now know, was sending out, there was this database. They were basically saying, we're going to need this vetted. Who are these people? Because a lot of these people would have had no right to come here. Well, some 70,000 of them haven't been brought here. Yeah. And they're still alive, as far as we're aware. But we're told even some of them could sue. But even though the Taliban said that they've had this list since 2022, when it was first leaked, of course they would have, and they'd have known a lot of these names anyway, the ones that were legit. But even the British government didn't find out about it, we're told. Again, We don't. No reason to believe a word they say until 2023.
But then again, we don't know how many are still alive and how many have been killed because there's nobody recording that data. And then we get to the change of government, and the new government comes in and spends a year trying to set the conditions to release this. And all of a sudden, the conditions for release are, the threat has disappeared. Well, no, it's not the government that sets the threat. It'll be the intelligence and security agencies that set the threat. And knowing the way the Taliban work and all the rest of it, there is no way the threat just stops after 4 years. They think in generations, and they will hold grudges for generations. So the threat hasn't gone. So we were lied to by the last government. We're being lied to by this government as they try to bring it out and use it as political point scoring. There's so much more to this that hasn't come out, and that's why I'm cynical and say they've talked about 16, 17-year-olds' votes today to try and take it off the headlines.
There you are then. What do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call on that. Can we also talk about the small matter of unemployment?
It's gone up.
It announced this morning up to 4.7%. It crept up by 0.1 percentage point. Last month it crept up by 0.1 percentage point. It's going in the wrong direction. Inflation also going in the wrong direction, up from 3.4% to 3.7% in the latest figures yesterday. We're told that we could be on the brink of stagflation. So you have a stagnating economy, but you still get inflation. And you're supposed, those things are supposed to be mutually exclusive, but they definitely are not. And the thing is, we've got, Labour, we have this absurd Mansion House speech from the Rachel, what is her? God,
Reeves.
She's so grey and nothing.
Boring.
Literally forgot her last name. She's the Chancellor of the Exchequer. That tells you something, doesn't it? I just try and forget her. Rachel Reeves. I was thinking from accounts, but what is her surname? So Rachel from accounts. She does a Mansion House speech. This is supposed to be important stuff. Okay, the Afghan story took over the headlines, but basically no one really cares what she talks about. She was talking about red tape, stamping on the foot of putting basically dampening down businesses' ability to do the job. This is a few months after she has put a tax on jobs, literally a tax on hiring people, and they're putting in the red tape of these absurd employment rights that they're bringing in from day one. Basically, you're going to be unsackable, and you're going to have a right to have a day off if you stub your toe, to all intents and purposes, or if your great aunt stubs her toe and you're a bit upset about it. And genuinely these employment rights are insane, unworkable. You'd be mad to hire anybody, frankly, if you're an employer at this point. And this is where we've got fewer jobs available. We've got even wage increases are now started going down, which tells you it's a weaker jobs market. We're supposed to be getting growth because that's how we're going to pay for everything. Spending isn't going to be cut back. It's going to be more on defence, more on welfare, more on the NHS, more on everything else. I mean, the numbers simply don't add up.
No, they don't add up, and the logic doesn't add up. But the logic of if you attack business, they're going to employ fewer people is now coming back to roost, and the government is realising it. I saw headlines that Jaguar and Land Rover are going to lose 500 people, and this is happening across the board. We've seen things.
But that might be to do with the American tariffs, though.
Well, but it's everything. It's also the employment costs. Your Poundland has had to be sold, and they're closing lots of stores down.
Our local Poundland had to close down about a year ago because the shoplifting was so much they genuinely couldn't. They literally could not keep it afloat.
Yeah, and it's happening across. We see across the retail sector, and we see across so many sectors.
Hospitality.
We've got so many pubs closing down as well because hospitality can't afford.
As I keep saying, it's all going terribly well.
And Rachel from accounts, Rachel Reeves, she doesn't realise this.
Meanwhile, there is a steely focus on growth. Okay.
What is it that's growing?
Yeah, exactly. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Afghanistan, votes at 16, you name it, give us a call. 0344 499 1000. A little bit later in the show, actually, I also want to talk about parents wanting school holidays in the summer, 6 weeks in state schools, to be cut down to just 4 weeks because of the huge cost of funding, taking time off work or having to pay for school holiday parental cover. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Is reform something you've thought about, JG?
Look, I've been a member of the Conservative Party, Jeremy, for 18 years, my entire adult life, tragic as that may sound. I've never felt so despondent and disheartened with the Conservative Party, but having been a member for that long, seen the good, the bad and the ugly, I really want to believe that at some stage we're going to fully acknowledge our mistakes, completely understand and empathise why some of my former colleagues, like Jake Berry, have chosen to go to Reform UK. And of course, at times, I've looked at things and thought it could be quite tempting.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 11:26 is the time. Lots of calls coming in. 0344 499 1000. I don't know if I've told you this bit. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs 1 standard network rate message. And you can text us on 87222. Interestingly, actually, again, if Philip Ingram's right, and this is all like a little conspiracy theory, and they're talking about votes at 16 and 17 in the next election across the UK. And that's getting us to stop talking about Afghanistan. Well, it's certainly working in terms of the phone calls. Lots of you calling in on that. Lewis is on the line. He is in Oxford. Hello, Lewis.
Hi, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed. I just want to check. Are you over 16 yourself?
I am, yes. Unfortunately,
a long way, or just like a year?
No, quite a long way. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. I've got a son who's 17. So yeah.
So, do you think he should have the right to vote?
No, Julia. I mean, look. Here's the thing. I think it's quite an intelligent move by this left-wing government. I think it's a bad idea, and I'll tell you for why. If you give 16 and 17-year-olds the chance to vote, they're fresh out the education system.
Well, they're still in it, a lot of them.
So yeah, precisely. So they're not actually exposed to the world to understand what voting actually means for the future of the country. But more importantly than that, what is being drummed into them through this education woke system now is making it incredibly biased for children of that age, and they are children, to turn around and say, well, there's only one option, and that's the Labour way, which is the worst thing for the future of this country.
Well, I mean, I think more of them are going to turn green. I mean, it always astounds me. I mean, the eco, look, there's wokery, and then there's the whole, like, oh, let's just give free money to everyone from Labour and from Greens and Lib Dems. Yeah. But also there is the green, the green propaganda that kids are getting. Virtually your physics lesson is all about climate change now. Everything's about climate change.
It is, and I listen to even my younger son, who's only 10 years old, and the things that he actually says quite shock me, and I think it's almost like it's been drummed into him that it's the end of the world, and the ocean is rising and everything else, and well, we were told that 100 years ago, well, you know, and still we're fine on our little island. So I do think, Julia, that this is going to be incredibly detrimental towards serious political parties in the future that we need in for the sake of our country. Yeah. To now to not give these 16 and 17-year-olds the chance. 18, to me, in my personal opinion, is still too young. You know, I think you should be 21. Personally, I think you need to be exposed to the world and what happens, where you can make your... Because if I look at myself when I was 18, I was too young to vote, really, Julia.
But we have... I think there is an argument on the train. I mean, when women were first given the vote in 2018, they weren't allowed to vote until they were 28. I mean, we used to have a property qualification, you know, and I hate it. I always hate that sort of left-wing sort of centrist dad thing, like, oh, no, you should have to pass a test to be able to vote. No, actually, the wisdom of crowds has proven to be very, very, very much something that we should trust. What do you say, though, that actually, you know, the key thing here is that if we're going to say you can vote at 16, well, why can't you buy a pint at 16?
Yeah, precisely. So it goes back the other way as well. So if you can vote, then you can buy a pint, and to me that's feeding back into this whole ethos of, you know, let's not actually look after the well-being of children. And that's really what it should be about. It should be looking after the well-being, not allowing children to go, well, you're old enough to vote, so you're old enough to buy a pint, and you're now old enough to drive, and we know that most accidents are caused by young drivers and everything else that goes with it, and it's going to spiral out of control. So, Julia, I vehemently think that this is something that should not happen, and I only hope that this is not passed as a law.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be, and bearing in mind, of course, that laws can't hold it up. It was in the Labour manifesto. Lewis, thank you very much. I couldn't agree with you more on all of that. Ian is on the line. He's in London. Ian, you want to have your say on votes at 16 and 17 too?
I'll tell you what, the more you see of this government, the more you think we're actually being governed by fraudsters. Everything they're doing is a fraud. The reason why they're suddenly trying to rush this in, partly because of the Afghanistan thing, but my own personal opinion, that was caused by the civil servants more than the actual people. It's the civil servants that passed all of that. On the actual business with, like, the last major voting we had was shown that the country does not like the Labour government anymore. That if they could have it today or tomorrow, they'd be voted out.
Yeah.
And that is where it scared them. The reform vote, and I'll be quite sure if I wouldn't vote reform, but the actual voting shows now they don't like this government. This government came in purely because the anti-Tory vote. Nothing more, nothing less. Less than, what was it, less than 30% or just over 30% of the country that did vote voted for Labour.
Yeah.
But 70% of them don't want them.
Yeah.
And also this week, one last bit.
Carry on.
This week was a proof that they've passed in this trade union law that you don't have to have 50% now to call a strike. The BMA didn't even have 50% to call a strike.
They did. They had 55%. They had 55%.
Yeah, but the thing is, they want money for the NHS, but all the money that is going into pay rises, not into actually helping cure and helping to get people.
Although you need the staff, to do that. They would argue. Do you think this is just sort of political gerrymandering by the Labour Party? But may it come back to bite them, given that reform actually has a lot of support among under 18s and people in their 20s?
It will still be, because the main thing, because of the demographics, is that the right word, in the cities are mainly from foreign families. So the cities which are predominantly all Labour now, right, will still be Labour. It's just depending on what happens in the outer country bit. But as you said, and the gentleman that was on just now, who causes most of the road accidents? Right? It's all brand new drivers of 17. Right? This is just purely and simply whether it's like behind the scenes in Labour, we're really in trouble now. Who can we pick on? Who can we get on our ball within the 16, 17?
I tell you what. Also, they're still going to have to get them to actually vote. You know what they're going to end up doing? They're going to have postal ballots in schools, and there's going to be even more pressure from those, as Lewis, an earlier caller, pointed out, these woke teachers. Really good to hear from you, Ian. Thank you very much. Top calls there. I'd love to hear from someone who supports this. Maybe you say, well, I stick to the 17-year-olds, very clever and they're very knowledgeable and they should have the vote. Why shouldn't they? Should we just lower the age of adulthood to 16 across the board? You can have sex, but you can't get married. You can't buy a pint, but you can, 17, drive a car. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Honestly, I'd love to hear from you, particularly if you support this move by Labour. You think that actually we should lower their voting age to 16. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number. 11:33 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking about why Reform are taking on Ed Miliband and his subsidies for wind and solar farms, saying if we get elected, those all end. Do you really want to put all that investment into a wind farm or a solar farm, which isn't actually going to last more than a few years? We'll talk to Ross Clark up about that.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:36 is the time. Lots of your calls coming in. Think of us again. I really want to hear from you. If you do support voting age being cut to 16, do get in touch. 0344 499 1000. Lots of calls still coming in on Afghanistan and that cover-up and the £1 billion. It's going to be more than that. It's going to be more than that. It always is. The compensation we're going to end up paying to people who we've rescued from Afghanistan. And you'd think that would be compensation enough. But there we are. Philip Ingram is still with me, and he's former senior military intelligence officer. Just before we go to our guest on the next topic, I just want to note from you, because we've had a lot of statements being made from the Energy Secretary Ed Miliband this week, the religious zealot par excellence in this government, saying that if you don't support net zero policies, if you don't believe in climate change, if you're a quote climate denier, you are unpatriotic, and that the issue of climate change is the biggest threat to the British way of life. I mean, you work in military intelligence over the years. Is it the biggest threat to British way of life?
Ed Milliwatt turning around and saying that the importation of Chinese technology is what we need to reduce the threat to British way of life. I think the biggest threat to British way of life is coming from a number of places. It's the uncontrolled immigration cross channel and other into this country that's destabilising our way of life as British people. It's the manipulation of the information sphere by hostile states who are behind sending a lot of these people into our country, and the way that that's going to affect those that can be manipulated when it comes to the voting population.
Oh! He's tied it all in. You've got to love that. Right, let's go to our next guest on this. Ross Clark, a friend of the show, of course, and author of the brilliant book, Not Zero, How an Irrational Target Will Impoverish You, Help China, and Won't Even Save the Planet. And I'm going to deduce from that title of that brilliant book, I know you've written many since then, but that's the relevant one to this topic. I'm going to deduce from that, Ross Clark, that Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, probably thinks that you're unpatriotic.
He probably does. And if you remember a few years ago, the Daily Mail made the assertion that Ed Miliband's dad was hated Britain because of his communist views. And Ed Miliband was absolutely outraged by that. You know, how dare you accuse my father of being unpatriotic and so on. But now he's going around sort of throwing out these accusations that people who question anything about his energy policy are unpatriotic. No, it's absolutely pathetic, isn't it?
What I find extraordinary is we call him a religious zealot here. I mean, it's a religious obsession because it's totally devoid of fact. But it's always very typical. The eco cult. Whenever there is criticism, throw out those insults rather than actually tackling the actual debate. Now, the debate has moved on. He was criticising Reform MPs and some Tory MPs questioning net zero policies as well. But Richard Tice, the Reform UK deputy leader, he's actually chosen to write to the biggest energy companies, and basically he's told Britain's biggest wind and solar developers, they include SSE Renewables, Octopus Energy, Centrica, Equinor and others, to give them formal notice that a Reform government would tear up any deals that they strike with the Energy Secretary currently, and they would no longer get any subsidies for solar and wind power. Now, what impact would that actually have on the policy in the here and now?
Yeah, well, these are things called contracts for difference, which basically offer owners of operators of wind and solar farms a guaranteed price for their energy for 15, 20 years into the future.
That's a good deal.
It is a very good deal.
There aren't many companies who can get a guaranteed price. So no matter what happens to energy prices, up, down, whatever, they've got a guaranteed price.
It takes away all the risk, essentially. And they deny it's a subsidy. They say, oh, no, we don't receive any subsidies anymore. Well, yes, this is a
wait a second, so let's clarify. When that guaranteed price is happening, now the government effectively buys energy that they then... No, who buys the energy? I mean, that's the thing I'm trying to work out, because we're paying for it.
There's a wholesale market. I mean, the electricity suppliers have to buy electricity on the market, and there's all kinds of arrangements for doing that. But basically what happens that if the wind farm and solar farm owners get lower market price than their guaranteed price, then the government makes up the difference. If, on the other hand, they get a higher price than the agreed price under the contracts for difference, well, the wind and solar farms then pay back the government the difference. But it is a form of subsidy.
Yes.
Now, it's one thing for Reform to say we're not going to issue any more of these contracts, but they've gone rather further than that, and they're saying, well, we're not going to honour existing contracts, and I think that really wouldn't be a good idea, because they obviously end up in the courts, and a Reform-led government would very likely lose on that point.
But isn't the key thing there, that is going to, given where Reform are in the polls, and yes, look, we've got a long way to go to the next election, realistically. Mike Graham is unlikely, even he admits, to get his dream of getting an election tomorrow. In which case, we're in a situation where this would actually possibly deter a lot of these companies from making a lot of the investments, spending the outlay on the basis that you think you're going to get 15, 20 years of guaranteed returns, and actually it's going to probably only be 5, and then you're going to be left with a whole heap of costs.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I think Reform are up to. I mean, they're just trying to...
I think it's genius.
...throw a spanner in
it.
the works of Ed Miliband's plan to expand wind and solar energy by sowing a bit of doubt in the minds of wind and solar farm owners that, maybe this isn't such a good investment, and therefore we won't invest in...
I mean, we should all be investing in this, because this is where the big money is. I mean, this is the thing. You get the likes of, the Dale Vinces of the world, big Labour Party donor, big supporter of Ed Miliband, who says that people like you and me should probably be criminalised. Again, people use this phrase climate denial. I don't think you've ever denied there's a climate, neither have I. I find it quite bizarre. But anyone who questions anything of policy is somehow a bad person. It's like, lockdown, when people, any criticism or questioning of the science. Oh, you're a bad person. You should, be, taken out of polite society. It's a very, very strange thing to do. If you're very strong on your facts and you understand, your facts can clear the argument. I never understand why people want to shut down critics if they think that the critics don't have the facts on their side.
No, exactly. I mean, facts can stand up for themselves, can't they? And it's not just Dale Vince was a UN special rapporteur. These people who...
Usual suspects.
They use the UN to advance their own personal agendas. Who called for a sort of a ban on climate change denial, what she called climate change denial, the other day. There's only one reason why you would want to ban a point of view, is that because you don't have the confidence of arguing against it.
And this is the thing. The stories come in all the time, and I'm so glad there's now scrutiny of this. And you've been utterly brilliant at this, because you make it, a lot of it's very complicated, and you make it very, very easy for those of us who are not scientific brains to understand about what's really going on. But the stories we've seen this week about, £3,750 subsidies for people to buy electric vehicles, because people don't want to buy them. And even with the subsidies, the Tories had a subsidy about £4,000. People still didn't want to buy the sodding things. And then to talk about, people can't charge them because they haven't got a driveway, which is something like 4 out of 10 people don't have a driveway. So we can give you a gully down the side of the street, so across the pavement, so we can have some wiring, so you can plug it in without causing a risk to pedestrians and getting sued by it. Forgetting the fact, when I live in a flat, if I were stupid enough to buy an electric vehicle, I'm lucky sometimes to park outside my own building, and I'm not at the front of the building, so I don't know where that wire is coming out anyway. I mean, it's almost like they don't know how most people live their lives. It is extraordinary. But they're also desperate for us to have heat pumps fitted. But now they're saying that households with heat pumps would get £200 a year off their energy bills. But why would you need to do that if we're told that the benefit of a heat pump is so obvious and brilliant, and that you can heat your home brilliantly and it will cost you less money? Why would you need to have an added discount paid for by the taxpayer?
Well, you wouldn't, because these heat pumps, they're absolutely expensive to start with. And then you know what happened when the previous government announced these £7,500 grants for heat pumps. The price just leapt. So all these companies thought, oh, that's very nice. We'll pocket all that grant as a profit. And but there's a more general point to be made here. Cheaper electricity for heat pump owners, grants for electric cars, and all these kind of subsidies, they go to relatively well-off people.
Exactly.
And you think the government bangs on and bangs on about how the people with the broadest shoulders must bear the greater tax burden and so on. But when it comes to anything green, the whole thing reverses, and you get sort of, relatively poor taxpayers subsidising relatively well-off.
Every single person I know who drives an electric vehicle, it is their second car or even their third car. I know a couple and I love them to death, but they go on about, like, we've got our green car, we've got our electric vehicle. I pointed out the other car parked in their driveway was an Aston Martin. We are subsidising people who can afford an Aston Martin. This is madness. Ross Clark, always fantastic to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. You're unpatriotic, so am I. We're both going to end up in jail. I've already bagged to the top bunk. Whatever I'm going to go to jail for, climate denial, or knowing that a woman is a trans woman isn't a woman. I forget. I mean,
you're forgetting
whatever it is, whatever I'm going to jail for, I want the top bunk. That's my rule. Philip Ingram, I mean, this is the case. Everything, they just deny it's a subsidy. They are literally throwing billions of pounds of our money at trying to push technology that people don't want, they can't afford, and they're basically subsidising the woke Guardian reading middle classes to try and make themselves feel good about things, because I'm saving the planet by buying a really expensive electric vehicle as my third car.
If everyone in the UK drove everything electric and had heat pumps and didn't rely on gas and all the rest of it, it would have zero effect on the global climate.
And I'll tell you what it would have an effect on. It would have an effect on the fact that no one could get anywhere or heat their homes. You know why? Exactly. Because a lot of it would be electric and we don't have the electrical supply. Why don't we? Because we are relying too much on wind and solar.
Yeah. And we'd have bought it all from China. So it would have given the Chinese huge influence into the way our lives are.
And just to clarify, given that most of these things are made in China, how do they provide the energy for all those factories?
Oil, gas and coal.
Yay! 11:47 is the time. It just, honestly, it's properly mad, but it's unpatriotic to point it out. That's the mad bit. Up next, going to talk about the woke police finally getting a slap on the wrist from a judge over basically taking part in basically a pro-trans march when the police, I know this is an old-fashioned idea, are supposed to stay neutral on contentious political ideologies. We'll talk to Peter Blexley, former Met Police detective, about that up next. This is Talk.
Is reform something you've thought about, JG?
Look, I've been a member of the Conservative Party generally for 18 years, my entire adult life, tragic as that may sound. I've never felt so despondent and disheartened with the Conservative Party, but having been a member for that long, seen the good, the bad and the ugly, I really want to believe that at some stage we're going to fully acknowledge our mistakes, completely understand and empathise why some of my former colleagues, like Jake Berry, have chosen to go to Reform UK. And of course, at times, I've looked at things and thought it could be quite tempting.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Amazingly, Philip Ingram and me, we've yet to actually be taken away in handcuffs by the climate police for things, but there we are. We might be taken away by police for anything, though. I've always said I'm with J.K. Rowling in terms of if I'm going to be get a non-crime hate incident or even a hate crime for refusing to say that trans women are women, then so be it. Well, very, very interesting case to discuss right now. Police officers face being banned from participating in pride marches and parades after a court ruled that one of Britain's largest police forces, this is Northumbria Police, breached impartiality by marching at an LGBT plus rights event. The Chief Constable acted unlawfully, the judge ruled. Yesterday, when she allowed uniformed officers to march under a transgender flag at a Pride event last year. The judicial review was brought by Lindsay Smith. She's what's called a gender-critical campaigner, i.e. a sane person who understands that trans-identified men are still men and not women. She argued that the force broke the professional oath sworn by police officers to act with impartiality. And officers from Northumbria, they not only had a stall at the parade in Newcastle, they marched under the Progress flag promoting trans ideology. They painted a police van with trans colours at your and my expense, by the way. And the judicial review basically ruled, well, no, this is contrary to the uniformed officers' duties of impartiality. Gotta love this. Well, let's talk about this with Peter Bleksley, former Metropolitan Police Detective. Peter, thank you for joining us. And this is an amazing victory for common sense, isn't it?
It is such a joy to be able to come onto your station and your show today and discuss, for once, a common sense ruling in relation to contemporary 2025 policing. A matter of huge joy, which clearly shows what a fool and what an ideological zealot Chief Constable Vanessa Jardine is. Clearly incapable of leading her police service effectively and, moreover, properly. She's not fit for service. She should go immediately.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, she's not the only one. They're all doing the same, and we've all seen these police vans and everyone. Now, we know that marches need to be policed, often to either protect the people who are marching, or to just generally keep order along the route. And we've got no problem with that. And I've got no problem whether it's Notting Hill Carnival or a Pride March or whatever it is. If police are, being friendly and the like. But as a general rule, I think we expect police to be doing, I don't know, go crazy, policing rather than when in uniform and wearing their uniform unless they're on duty, it seems to me to be inappropriate anyway, to be marching on an issue like this. Now, because there is a very big difference, isn't there, about gay pride. Again, I've got to be honest with you, since gay people have had the same rights as straight people for certainly, in the last 10 years, everything has changed in terms of rights and things. It seems to me that, this is still ongoing, but I'm not bothered by that. It's a celebration after a lot of people would have been raised when it was a source of shame. We're constantly told this is often about trans rights, queer rights, non-binary rights. And again, these are completely different things. But this is an ideology which is very controversial. That's why there have been Supreme Court rulings about it. That's why there have been death threats and rape threats against authors and people who speak out, like J.K. Rowling, for arguing about it. It seems to me to be, we've seen Nicola Sturgeon, the Scottish First Minister, pretty much one of the main issues that she lost her job over was over this. This is a very divisive, dangerous political ideology. And police officers have got no business taking part in a parade in that context, have they?
Absolutely. And it clearly shows that Chief Constable Jardine has lost the plot in terms of the very fundamentals, the basic principles of policing without fear or favour, with impartiality. If I was still serving, would happily police a Pride March. But what I would do is I would be there to protect the march. I would be continually looking out for signs of danger, threat, violence, anything that might come about that needed to be policed, acted upon. I most certainly would not hold the banner, the flag or a line to any ideology whatsoever, like taking the knee, like dancing at Pride, like marching, literally holding a transgender flag. Utterly appalling. Well done to Ms. Smith, who brought this action. Brilliant ruling from the judge. And yet again, Jardine should go.
Again, but then that would be an awful lot of other police officers going. You bring in Black Lives Matter and that extraordinary scene of those police officers taking the knee. I think a lot of them felt quite intimidated. But we've seen a lot of this. We see activism in the police. Activism is in every sports event. It's just non-stop. The virtue signalling, the trans issue. I can't go to my local supermarket without being inundated with trans propaganda. It's in the social media. It's when you want to buy a car. It's just everywhere. But what's fascinating is the police not getting the They need to be seen to be impartial in these issues. And we've seen again and again when this, I hate the phrase gender critical. This is just people who understand biological sex and want to protect women's rights. People like Kelly J. Keane, even when they're speaking at things like Speaker's Corner, where, you know, this is long established right for people to say whatever they want at Speaker's Corner. And if you go there, expect you might not like what you hear. But women being intimidated, threatened by masked, sometimes balaclavaed, clearly men, with aggressive behaviour, sometimes even actually physically threatening and hurting the women who are speaking, holding placards, you know, saying, you know, kill a turf, you know, things like that, meaning women standing up for women's rights. And we have not seen proper policing of that because these police officers are too busy attending a march in favour of trans ideology instead of protecting women from thuggish men.
It is a very breach of the basic tenets of policing, that deal between the public and the police being broken. But this we've seen for a number of years, a generation or more of police leaders who have gone to university, who have been indoctrinated, who come out with letters after their names, thinking they are so important and part of the academic intelligentsia, which actually policing is far more straightforward than that. What policing actually needs is service to a public and understanding the service that the public wants. But when police change from forces to service, a lot more change, sadly, than just the name.
Absolutely. And it's not just whether at university. I don't care whether someone's gone to university or not gone to university, as long as they can do the job and understand the job. But it's the College of Policing in particular, isn't it? And the routes by which people get up the ladder. And police officers tell me privately, you cannot get anywhere up the ladder anymore unless you sign up to all of the woke stuff, whether it's, oh, everyone's a racist, whether it's, well, we're not sure whether, globalize the intifada is actually a call for the mass killing of Jews, whether you support gender ideology as opposed to women's rights not to be intimidated and under attack from men. I mean, if you don't sign up to that stuff, you are not getting promoted.
Absolutely. The greasy polar promotion is not for you. You have to speak their speak. You have to think their think. It is the only way to get into the senior ranks of policing these days. And you mentioned the much discredited College of Police, which is basically a quango with such a high opinion of itself that it named itself the college. You know how posh people say they went to college when they actually mean university. Right? That's where it stems from. Their overinflated view of themselves. And while I'm criticising them, I have to mention the National Police Chiefs Council.
Oh, yes.
Vanessa Jardine of Northumbria Police, the Chief Constable, who I've mentioned, is the National Police Chiefs Council lead on, guess what? LGBTQ.
Oh, you shock me.
There you go.
There we
are.
And
therefore, she has followed this ideology, implanted it into the brains of some of her police officers and been firmly slapped down by a brilliant common sense judicial ruling.
Absolutely. Well, let's hope that ruling brings some sense. Not too hopeful. I mean, even that Supreme Court ruling didn't change an awful lot of things, did it? Peter Blexey, former Met Police detective, had to have him in charge any day of the week. Philip Ingram, what do you make of this?
Well, judicial common sense, that's another shock as well. But, no, the Chief Constable...
No, that's true. You don't get promoted in the judiciary now, unless you sign up to the woke career. I mean, the stuff they're expected to say they pretend they believe it, or actually believe, is terrifying.
And this Chief Constable has just been found out for doing something illegal. She can't retain her position in the National Police Chiefs Council for being found
Except they'll all back each other up because they're all doing it.
Well, a police officer doing something that's illegal. The courts have found her illegal.
You'd think,
I think she has to go.
Yeah. OK, well, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. Lots more coming up. Up next, going to take the latest headlines. Then we're going to be talking more about that Afghan MOD data leak and the compensation we're going to be paying. I'll take more of your calls on that and on votes for 16 and 17-year-olds. Is this just a blatant case of gerrymandering? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. It's 2 minutes past 12 o'clock. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, and whether you're listening on DB Plus Radio or your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is great to have your company. Also the company of Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, who joins us every Thursday. Lovely to have you here, particularly to talk about, obviously, this Afghanistan story. If you have missed any on the show, well, more for you, frankly. How dare you leave the home? How dare you turn off your radio in the car? But if you have missed anything, you can go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. You can see the whole show. You can pick out some of the key clips. And if you hit subscribe, you will never miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we are going to be talking with a former joint operational commander with the British Armed Forces, who served 4 years in Afghanistan, about that Afghan data breach. And also the likely £1 billion cost to taxpayers, on top of all the other costs of compensation for those who've been brought here to safety. Why are we compensating people we've already brought to safety? We'll be talking about that. Plus, Keir Starmer has suspended 4 left-wing Labour MPs, 3 of whom I've literally never heard of, over their persistent breaches of discipline in an attempt to wrest a control back over his backbenchers. This after particularly the welfare revolt. And 16 and 17-year-olds, we learnt today, will be able to vote in the general election for the first time next time round. These are new plans unveiled today, which will mean the voting age is lowered in time for the next general election. Of course, was in Labour's manifesto. It was always to be expected, but the timing of this announcement, some, including Philip Ingram, are questioning as a little bit of a dead cat strategy. Throw this out, look over here, don't look at what's going on the Afghanistan data leak. Also going to be talking about those strikes that are planned starting Friday next week. 5-day strike from resident doctors. 5 patients died as a result of disruption caused by these doctor strikes back in 23 and 24. That is what is estimated. But the Health Secretary Wes Streeting is meeting with BMA leaders today. Frankly, I'm not sure he's going to be able to come to some sort of deal with them, given that they want 29% pay rise, which is, let's face it, nothing like everyone else is getting. Anyway, we're going to talk about all of that. I want to hear from you. I particularly like to hear from you about this Afghan data leak, and particularly the £1 billion cost. Who knows? Probably going to be more. These things always end up costing more for compensation for those people who've actually been brought here after their names were divulged back in 2022. And the big cover-up, we had it all covered up until only Tuesday this week. But should we be paying as taxpayers compensation to people who've been brought here to safety as a result of this leak? What's your reaction to that? And I also want to hear from you about votes for 16 and 17-year-olds. It's been going on for Welsh Assembly votes and for Scottish Parliament votes for about 10 years now, I think. But they're going to bring the whole of the UK into line. 16 and 17-year-olds who are not allowed to buy a vape, buy a pint, buy a cigarette legally, or get married legally, or serve on the front line of the British forces, and most of whom are still in full-time educational training, are going to get the vote because someone, for some reason, thinks that they are actually adults, when, of course, they're not. That's going to be subject of debate. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost 1, standard network rate message. Philip Ingram, just coming back to the votes at 16 and 17, because we've got a lot of calls that have come in on that. You and I have both been saying, in terms of why would we let kids vote? It doesn't make sense. It's just blatant political gerrymandering. Labour Party think they're going to get a load of votes from 16 to 17-year-olds who are more likely to be lefty, because people tend to be more left-wing, when you're not paying for anything. And you could just, don't really understand how the world works. You're not paying for tax. You're not struggling to pay the bills and getting a mortgage, and realising in the world of work that actually a lot of the time people aren't rewarded for working harder. You might have lovely little idealistic views, and they're probably all in favour of a universal basic income as well, and welfare benefits to everybody. I mean, I don't know if any of these people are going to be able to vote, because they're all going to be on the sick, claiming that they've got too much anxiety to go to work. But they think these people should go out to vote. I mean, is there a big question mark for you, the fact that you're not allowed to fight on the front line of the military until you're 18? You can join the army, but you can't. But go get married, buy a pint, buy a vape, buy a cigarette. this simply doesn't make any sense at all.
There's no sense to it whatsoever. So you start to look for the unsensical and the tinfoil hat related stuff, as Alex Phillips would say if she was sitting in her chair. And one of those potential theories is, well, we're letting so many people from Afghanistan, clearly it's trying to get off the headlines in, who like people to allow marriage at 9 and 12 to children.
This is a good point. Now, people shout bigot when people shout that, but this is the reality, and it goes on every day in Afghanistan and other Middle Eastern countries. But the Taliban, absolutely, children are married off who are at primary school age to adult men, complete strangers, and they have well, let's call it what it is. They rape those children, and it's all legal and approved.
And therefore, government policy when it comes to dealing with anything like this seems to go down to that lowest common denominator, hitting some of the issues that minorities are bringing into this country, changing the culture of our country.
MPs for Gaza.
It's just wrong. Yeah, it's
this is what we have. Okay, right. Well, very interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Let's get to our first guest in this hour. Delighted to be joined by Colonel Ash Alexander Cooper, OBE. He's the former Joint Operational Commander with British Armed Forces. He spent 4 years himself serving in Afghanistan. Very good afternoon to you.
Hi, Julia.
Hi, thanks so much for joining us. Just briefly, first of all, your reaction when you found out, if I assume that on Tuesday you were also, like the rest of us, found out only on Tuesday about this, not only this data leak, which happened way back in 22, but the government said they only found out about it in 23, and the fact that for the best part of 2 years it was kept secret using super injunctions in the courts. What was your reaction to that?
I think probably overwhelming disappointment that yet another cock-up really has happened that has put lives at risk and cost money and trauma for many people. Clearly avoidable, and I think a lot of questions still need to be answered about those that were applying for that scheme. I think 18,000 applied, which is whether the numbers sort of get captured and have gone up to maybe 100,000 when you add families and stuff. Of those 18,000, I wonder how many actually would have been eligible had the process gone through normally, and how many of those that we rushed through were actually legitimate applicants, because those that were legitimate, many of whom I served with, did not get through and were left behind, and some have been killed.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? And we know only a fraction of those people did actually end up getting brought to this country, and we were told that original, the £7 billion cost that was mentioned repeatedly in court hearings under the super injunction is now not expected to be the cost. We're looking at sort of possibly up to £850 million. It'll be more than that, so let's assume £1 billion in terms of the cost of bringing people over. And then, of course, we're looking at the compensation. I'd like to come on to that. But as you say, I know people who, I've had people who get in touch with me when we had the Kabul airlift who were desperately trying to get out of the country. I've stayed in touch with the man we've called Sammy, who has showed me proof that he was an Afghan interpreter. Now, whether he was not, I'm not in a position to verify, but I'm pretty sure the MOD is. I've given their details. I've given the details to, the then Defence Secretary Ben Wallace's special advisor, spoken to him about it. Senior figures who've been working trying to get people out of Afghanistan. We know that there were many people who genuinely did work with British forces who would be at risk, who are still stuck and living in hiding in Afghanistan. And yet at least one of the people who's been allowed to come here is someone who didn't work with British forces but had threatened to expose this leak on social media and has been brought to here with his family.
Yeah, I think the thing that makes me really cross is that there are, as you said, there are people who legitimately put their lives at risk, in some cases for up to 20 years, supporting what the UK wanted to do, so supporting UK interests, and many have lost limbs or lost friends and colleagues, and I've certainly had Afghans shot and killed or blown up in front of me or next to me and around me, and they are clearly very legitimate applicants, those that survived and wanted to come here. There are others who may have worked for the British government for very short periods of time, who may have a case, but when one's trying to prioritise the severity of the threats to their lives, one really should apply a sensible metric to say, who is at most risk and who isn't. And I worry that with this leak, that there is a potential that people who really would never have gone through the process had there been a proper process were rushed through, and that meant that others could not get here.
And we understand that original list that was leaked, where they were basically saying, no, we're going to need to vet these people because we don't know any Tom, Dick or Harry could apply. It doesn't mean they're going to be found to be legitimate. But I understand you've been contacted by people in the last few days reading this news who are stuck in Afghanistan?
I honestly, I get messages every week from all sorts of people, from civilians who are journalists or human rights activists or female, professional, all sorts of roles that are now persecuted or can't leave their houses or are in hiding. So that wave of there's a constant wave really of people reaching out to see if I can help. I helped others.
This is the difficulty, though, isn't it? Because basically we should say, well, anyone who had any sort of role, particularly women or anyone in the civil society, women professors, women politicians, any girl who can't go to school, these people are having a terrible time. We should take them in, but we can't take 20 million people. I mean, that's absurd. Obviously. How much of a duty of care do we have? And also the argument that, again, I think there's a difference when British forces have actually said, please help us as interpreters, working intricately with British forces, and in return for which we will guarantee your future safety. And Afghans signing up for an Afghan army, I'm still not convinced why we have a duty of care to those men, for instance.
Yeah, well, that's my point, that there are different roles that people performed for us over many years. Some may have been on a couple of months contract and may have even been fired for not actually performing, and therefore they have a certificate that may have said they worked, but they didn't really do as much as others that really did put their lives on the line day in, day out for many years and have been stuck there. So I think we have to apply a sensible metric here to work out who actually was eligible. We clearly can't take everybody, but I fear that, well, I know that there are many who were the most deserving, who did the most for us, who were ejected for stupid administrative errors where a misspelt name on a spreadsheet meant that they were rejected when they turned up at Kabul airport. Those sort of things are really upsetting when you then hear that they were murdered in front of their families to send a message to anyone else who was seeking to try and get out of the country. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, it is actually heartbreaking, especially some of these people actually being promised, we will get you out. What do you make of the law firms, two law firms who are Barings Law and Lee Day? I no doubt many others will come forward as well, who, bizarrely, they were able to know about this, even though taxpayers and MPs and many government ministers in this current government weren't able to know about this. Indeed, government ministers in the government that got the super injunction under the Tories, that they have already got some 1,000 people to sort of sign up to a case where they're going to sue the British government over the fact their names were leaked in this big data breach. And we're looking at compensation, 50k, 150k, even more each. We're looking at possibly £1 billion. No doubt it could even go higher. When they've been brought to this country to live safely, now, even if their lives have been put at risk, they have now been rescued. They're living in on the cost of the British taxpayer already. It's the taxpayer who'll end up paying any compensation, ultimately, not the government, not the MOD. They haven't got any money that isn't ours. What do you think about people being allowed, after being brought here to safety, to sue for compensation from effectively the British people?
I would frame it slightly differently. That we've seen this before. Lee Day has got form in this space from the Iraq days. I wouldn't blame the Afghans themselves on the whole for this claim or this group claim being raised. We've seen it time and again that there are law firms that see an opportunity to exploit the system, which will make them a lot of money. And I've seen it where fairly ill-informed, let's say Iraqis or Afghans or others coming to this country will be told just to sign paperwork and they might get some money. Of course, they're going to say yes if they're told that that's a case they can win. I don't think we should be directing our ire at the Afghans themselves. I think we have to look at the law firms that are bringing this and understand what is their motivation, because I think I agree with you that if they're already here and there is no risk to them because they are safe and they don't have family members that are left behind, then it's quite hard to justify.
Yeah, and simply because of the simple fact that actually being able to live here and not live under the Taliban in Afghanistan, that is more than any compensation they could possibly have for any risk they had.
And every Afghan that I know that either I've helped or I'm aware were helped by my friends or colleagues, all they want to do is not be a burden and to contribute to society. They are integrated. They are delivering, really, high impact, roles and jobs, and want to just be a part of this society, and are so grateful to the UK government for getting them over here. So again, we have to be careful not to tar the entire population with the same brush when there are a few bad
and
apples.
That is a very good point, isn't it? Because we know, look, there is a rate of criminality among Afghan people who have come to this country, which is off the scale compared to pretty much any other country in terms of their chances, their chances of being convicted of a crime. These are official statistics. This isn't people thinking it. This is a reality compared to other immigrants, but also compared to the British population at large. But often in that case, we are talking about people who have arrived here illegally, boat migrants. That's very, very different from people who've been brought in, who have served with British forces and often saved the lives of our British soldiers.
No, absolutely. I mean, the people that I served with have the highest levels of integrity and morals and community spirit, and they are disciplined and honourable people. Those that come across in boats will still be lumped into that Afghan group. Yeah. And if it says Afghans are committing crimes, it is, I'm pretty much say I can guarantee that it's none of the people that I would have served with. They are honourable people who want to just get on and make the most of the opportunity that the British government has given them. We should respect them for that.
That is very interesting. Thank you for that. Interesting to have that perspective. What do you make of the whole cover-up entirely? The fact that this was covered up for so long and with a super injunction, not even the Joint Intelligence Committee MPs who've been trusted with official secrets for many decades, not even being told about this, in spite of the fact that, for a long time in the court conversations seen by, witnessed by journalists who were not allowed to report on it from the Mail and the Times, that we were looking at £7 billion of taxpayers' money being earmarked to pay for all of this, and there's been no public scrutiny. Taxpayers weren't informed, even MPs of the Defence Select Committee weren't informed. What do you make of that as someone who's served in the forces and will understand when there have to be secret operations and signing the Official Secrets Act, and obviously there are things that we can't know about, and often for many years, but do you think it was justified in this case?
I think the scrutiny is coming now. The fact that we're even talking about it, or every channel is talking about it and trying to hold people to account, I think that will come, and we have to be perhaps patient to once all the facts come out, because people are still only having probably a portion of the facts that are available, and they're being drip fed or coming to light every day. I think that needs to happen. I'm more focused on trying to hope or ensure that this doesn't happen again. Whatever process allowed this to happen that has ended up putting people at risk and costing taxpayers money that they shouldn't be liable for, that mustn't be able to happen again. And as long as the lessons are learned and genuinely learned, not just identified but properly learned, then we can make progress.
If only we could have faith in that. Colonel Alexander Cooper, OBE, former Joint Operational Commander with the British Armed Forces, 4 years serving in Afghanistan. Thank you. Great to hear your perspective on that. Philip Ingram, listening to all of that, your face was a picture at the end of, learning the lessons. Whenever I hear that phrase, I know they won't be learned. Your reaction to what he had to say?
I agree with everything that Ash said, but the Ministry of Defence never learns lessons. Yeah. It really identifies them time after time after time. And I think the whole thing that's coming out of this is an arrogance in the Ministry of Defence that it thinks it can ride roughshod over the processes that we have in the constitutional processes that we have in this country, the constitutional oversights that we have in this country, and that they can make the rules up and none of them apply to them. Yeah. That's the big bit here. Yeah. The real fault in the MOD. It's not quite the ministers that are there. It's all the civil servants and senior officers that are enabling it as well.
My question mark over all of this is what else don't we know?
Yeah.
What other things? We know that governments cover things up all the time, and most of the time it's a back covering exercise. We know, we know that they knew very high up in the NHS and in the government for years that they were importing infected blood and continued to give it to haemophiliacs and newborn babies, and despite the fact they knew they were giving them HIV and hepatitis. And even once they knew and they stopped doing it, they didn't tell people who'd had it, even though these people could have actually had some treatments. So if you're going to do that, right? If you're going to do that, if they knew about the post office scandal, they absolutely knew about it at the top level and did nothing about it. Every NHS crisis we've had, at some point they've known about it. We have this across the board. Grooming gangs. Across the board, governments cover their backsides rather than tell us the truth. How do we ever stop that? Other than a new party comes in and then they expose the cover-ups of the last government, and then the next one. That's the only protection we've got.
Yeah, when John Healey turned around and said he didn't know of any other cover-ups that were going on,
No, super injunctions. It was very specific.
Well, they're almost certainly...
He said, I haven't been read into them, if there are.
Exactly. And read into them means he hasn't been given
There are
the details,
100% more super injunctions right now, aren't there?
I know there are cover-ups in the Ministry of Defence, and I cannot talk about them.
Yeah. There we are then. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Give us a call. Afghanistan, and also those votes at 16. Lots of calls coming in on votes at 16 and 17. I want to hear from you if you're 16 or 17 and you think you should get the vote. I'd love to hear from someone who genuinely thinks this is a good idea. Please call in. You might be too sane because you watch this show to think that, but I find someone on the street who thinks that's a good idea and tell them to give me a call. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
The first time we've even been given this information, the first time the public's even been told what this breakdown looks like, that 1 in 6 people who are claiming universal credit aren't British. And we are a very, very generous country and people, but it's not viable to do this. It's not sustainable and it's not affordable for us to pay for everybody who comes here on the basis that they're going to contribute and then either stops working or falls on hard times or whatever it might be. People like that, unfortunately, will need to go home.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 12:24 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. Mike is on the line. He's in Bridgend in South Wales. Mike, what do you make of votes at 16? Bearing in mind, in Wales, they've had votes at 16 and 17 for the Welsh Assembly for some years now.
Yeah, well, I look, most countries have a voting age of 18. I think it's 100 plus. It's an outlier, the 16 age group, and you can only imagine why they're doing it. It's because they're in a bit of trouble now with the people who are entitled to vote. So they're casting the net a bit wider in the hope that will keep them in power at the next election. It's purely, that's all it is, just cynical gerrymandering.
I mean, it is completely. It was in their manifesto, so it's going to have support from their MPs. It's going to get through the Lords. They've got a right to do this, but it seems to me this is a very fundamental change to our voting system to extend the suffrage. I mean, that's a very. I'm thinking referendum, please.
Exactly. Well, the thing is, the situation is the Reform are performing very well. Seems like I think how they're performing isn't going to be reflected necessarily in the next election. But I just think they're fearful. So so they're bringing it forward just basically as a way of just expanding their voting base. Because basically all kids in the UK are taught not to like England very much. To basically think that making tough decisions is the wrong thing to do. To basically be soft on everything is the way forward. So kids in school are pretty much indoctrinated to be soft, and they're going to vote for the party which is the nice touchy-feely party, basically.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's going to bring England down incrementally and ever increasing speed. Britain is being brought down. Can you pinpoint a single thing in Britain which is going well currently? I can't.
Do you know what? I kept asking Tory ministers about that. It was summer last. I said, tell me one public service that functions, one thing in this country that functions well. And then they would sort of obfuscate. They would never actually. There was nothing. There's nothing in this country that works well anymore.
Is GDP per capita going up, or is it going down every few years? Is it going down and down and down, or are we having a spike in GDP per capita?
Yeah,
we've had a massive amount of immigration. It's good for the economy, so GDP per capita should be spiking up. We should be really prosperous.
Absolutely.
It's going down and down and down.
Absolutely. Unemployment going up, inflation going up, interest rates not coming down as quickly. Oh, no, it's an absolute disaster. Do you have a long-term sort of negative view of where the country's going, or do you think it can be safe? Because one of the reasons why I do this job every day is because I actually genuinely do believe in this country, and I believe in the British people, and I think that we can turn this around. We just need to get enough people to agree that we need to return to sanity.
Yeah, but I just fundamentally think that the everything is stacked against that. I fundamentally think that...
And that's part of this voting change, to stack against it.
Yes, Britain would have to Britain will have to fall so low. When it will do, it will have to be on its knees before anybody goes, hang on a second, maybe if we carry on doing all the stupid things we've been doing for the last 30 years, maybe it's going to get worse. But what will have to happen in Britain, the economy will have to fail. We'll have to be on our knees economically and socially.
We'll have to it's like the drug addict. We'll have to hit rock bottom before everyone... What we need is, if we could find a Millet, like Argentina has found, that would be the key. I mean, whether or not Nigel Farage is that person, I don't know. I think the jury's still out on that. I think even he thinks the jury's still out on that, to be honest with you. It's painful. I tell you one other thing, though. I have a funny feeling, genuinely a funny feeling, that Labour will live to regret this. That I think there's the support for reform from young people who don't feel they've got a future is going to be much higher than they think it is. And Nigel Farage will be much better at getting those votes out, the anti-establishment vote. But also, B, I think the votes on the left, the Gaza parties, Jeremy Corbyn and others, and the votes for the Greens, I have a funny feeling Labour might find this as a really bad move.
Possibly. Don't you think, though, that, I just personally think that the figures that bandied around, for example, that mistake one person made costing £7 billion, entire companies that are currently profitable multinational companies that are based in the UK, that's equivalent to all their profits for the next, so many decades.
Yeah.
It's equivalent to, the tax taken in a town like where I'm from, in Bridgend. Over decades, it's equivalent to, all the tax taken for all the towns in South Wales.
And it's all gone. Well, again, they say it's not going to be £7 billion. It's going to be much less than that, but it'll still be a few billion of quid that we don't have. Mike, I absolutely feel about it. But we need to stay fight genuinely. We turn this country around by fighting the good fight. We managed to we managed to fight the madness on trans. We managed to defeat lockdowns and stopping, that we were going to have a lockdown in December 2021. We're going to go back into another massive lockdown if it hadn't been for people who were speaking out on that. Lots of us are speaking out on the eco lunacy. We managed to turn, in terms of public opinion, that has massively changed. Reform anti-net zero. Tories are pretty much going to go into the next election pro anti-net zero policies. They're just pussyfooting their way towards it. We are changing people's minds one step at a time. And remember, the British people, when they were told by everybody who was great and good and in the know, and all the nice people, that voting for Brexit was a bad thing, they still voted for Brexit, 52% of them. I still have faith in the British people. Philip Ingram, do you agree?
I think we're keeping our heads above water, and we're helping the British people tread water only. But we're also sitting there getting ready to give CPR because we're slipping under a lot.
Well, again, number one thing is keeping freedom of speech. That's the thing. That's the biggest battle, because you can't argue with anything else without that. Let's go to Jason in Sheffield. Jason, I hope you're a little bit cheerier than Mike and Philip are.
Hello, Julia.
Hello.
And hello, Philip.
Hello.
It's I'm going to cheer you up a bit here, not.
He drew us in and then he let us down. Right, what are you going to say?
Yeah, it's this 16 and 17-year-old votes.
Yeah.
there is a hidden agenda here,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been thinking about it for a couple of years. It's not so much to do with gerrymandering the vote towards the Labour Party.
Mm.
What I personally think is, I mean, you may think I'm talking a load of rubbish, but...
And I will tell you that if I think that. Would you come on, get to it then? Come on.
And I hope you do. It's, but, do you know...
Come on, get to it, Jason. What's the theory?
If you set aside the voting thing, who do you think young people are most likely to vote for what?
I don't know. Jason, please, can you... I'm already over time. They're shouting at me to go to a break. So, come on, tell us what you think this is going to lead to. What's the secret agenda?
Going back into the EU. This is a precursor to calling another EU referendum.
I completely agree with you. I'm not going to shout you down on that, because they wanted 16 and 17-year-olds and EU citizens to vote in the first one, and they wanted 16 and 17-year-olds to vote when they had the election in 2019 to try and stop. I think you're right. Get all these young people in who've all been told that, Remain is the future. Yeah. I mean...
Labour will call another referendum on joining the EU if their polling is still as bad in 2018, 2019 as it is today. That's what they're doing.
Very interesting. Now, we got there in the end, Jason. Thank you very much. Sorry for hurrying you up, but we have to get to a break. Up next, going to talk about those resident doctors' strikes and the deaths that were actually linked to the last set of strikes. So we're going to see more this time. And we'll talk to James Matthewson. You know, it always gets lively. He is a former Labour official, but now is very independent from Labour. He very much supports votes at 16 and 17. Of course he does. We'll find out why coming up very soon. This is Talk. Stay tuned.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yes, indeed, this is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram's still with me. Just before we go on to our next topic, just very interesting, that caller we've just had about Jason, about this is a secret ploy, the 16 and 17-year-olds voting, secret ploy to lead into another referendum to basically get us back into the EU. By the way, I think Keir Starmer is definitely trying to do that. He would love to do that, but realistically, they're going to try and take us in by the back door before then, and well, then we may as well go back in. The EU will punish us so badly in terms of the amount of money. Trust me, after a proper debate on that. The British people will not be voting to go back in. I trust the British people on this. I 100% do. But just some new EU documents have shown that Britain will be made to pay into the EU's budget as the price for this reset deal that Keir Starmer has just pushed. The EU documents show there's a demand for financial contributions to bodies that manage things like food standards, the carbon market rules. So basically, we won't be able to drop net zero under this, that Britain will have to follow. But we can't make any changes to the rules. We can't amend the rules. We have no say in the rules. We're an EU rule taker, but we will be ending up paying for any of the costs of this, which is exactly what Keir Starmer wants, and that's the precursor to, well, if we're doing it anyway, we may as well be a rule maker as well. Let's go back into the EU. That's what he's going to want to do. I'm telling you, the British people are not going to fall for that. They're going to be very, very angry about that. I trust the British people on this. I absolutely do. 12:36 is the time. Let's turn our attention right now to the doctors' strikes. Junior doctors, as well as now resident doctors, they voted to go on strike for 5 days from 7 a.m. starting not tomorrow but next Friday. Last time they were doing 5 day strikes a couple of years ago, we did see patients die. At least 5 patients have been identified specifically as having died as a result of the disruption caused by those strikes in 23 and 24. Many of us would have had delayed cancer treatment, others because consultants weren't available to see them. They were working on the front line in A&E rather than doing their regular jobs. Well, NHS leaders are warning that more lives could be put at risk next week with those strikes. No wonder the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, is meeting with BMA leaders today. But, well, how much use is that meeting going to be? Dr. Lawrence Gurlis joins us. He's a medical commentator and a GP at Same Day Doctor. Good afternoon to you, Lawrence.
Hi, Julia. Hi.
Thanks for joining us. Just first of all, let's just talk about these deaths. I mean, I'm surprised it's so little, 5 deaths, but these are presumably the deaths that we are 100% sure, the officials are sure, died directly as a result, these patients, of those strikes. What sort of reasons would lead to someone to die specifically because doctors are on strike?
I mean, it's usually delayed diagnosis, people being left in A&E for too long. Then they're handed over to someone who, one of the real problems with these deaths is when you investigate them and you have case investigators, you see that 20 or 30 different people have been involved in the management, and the handover wasn't good. No one took overall responsibility. And that is what tends to happen. And I was very much against the strikes 2 years ago, mainly because I said I didn't think the government at the time would cave in, i.e. they wouldn't work. But also I think it's unprofessional. It looks unprofessional for doctors to be going on strike. Having said that, I have changed my position. This may surprise you, because the strikes did work. Yes. Because as soon as the Labour government came in, they caved in.
But the Labour government said, but only this time, this time. I mean, this is like parents saying, no, 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 yes, but only this time. Or what do you think your toddler's going to do next time? Come on.
Yeah, well, but what the Labour government should have done at the time is said, we're going to look at the working conditions. Junior doctors, resident doctors have been abused for 50 or 60 years.
Abused?
We should not be in this situation. They're on short-term contracts. They're bullied.
That's not abuse. No, I hate this word. Let's not use abuse or bullied. They have a really tough start to their working life, as do lots of people.
Yeah, but they have £100,000 in student debt as well. They're on short-term contracts, and then if you want a career in hospital, you're lucky if you get a training number, and then you could be in your early mid-30s. You can't just go into general practice because that's another 5 years of training. The whole structure, why can't doctors be given proper jobs with job security where they don't have to move around the country, which is a disaster. They can't get on the housing ladder and so on and so forth. I'm very sympathetic to the doctors.
No, I completely understand that. And I've said many a time, particularly, when we see train drivers actually earning more than these doctors. And again, gone through a lot. And it's not just because I'm a doctor's daughter. These people are, these are the top students at your school. These are the top students at university. And they've worked very, very hard. It's a tough job. We want to keep people in those jobs. I don't think we should be mollycoddling. I don't think if you're going to train as a doctor, you should work a 3-day week. I don't. I'm sorry. But I think we do have to understand that the world has changed, and especially a lot more women going into the profession. They want to spend they might want to meet their children at some point. My mum did an 80-hour week when I was at school. That is not tenable for lots of families now. Here's the thing though, when they claim they need a 29% pay rise on top of the 22% and the 4.5% they've already had, that's not going to fly with most people. That's under the retail price index, which most people are using the consumer price index. Under the consumer price index, they say that they've actually lost about 4.5% of their pay since 2010 in real terms. But they're claiming they've lost 29% under the retail price index since 2010. Look, the reality is most people in this country have lost real terms pay in the last 14, 15 years. Most people in the public sector and the private sector. Doctors aren't a special case, are they?
No, but should we be paying doctors' assistants, these physician associates, $10,000 a year more than what the doctors are getting?
Absolutely
Listen,
not.
I keep my ear very close to the ground on medicine. I wasn't aware that this plan to replace doctors with non-doctors, with people that haven't got a full medical training, I wasn't aware that was coming in. It's been insidious. It's got out of control. They were originally called physician assistants. They renamed them as physician associates. Now the Leng Review says they've got to be renamed back as assistants.
Because lots of patients think they're being treated by a qualified doctor and they're not.
A physician's assistant can earn £40,000 a year. They have a permanent job. They don't move around from one hospital to another. And that actually increases the bullying because the new doctor is always the new boy or the new girl. And they're always teased by the nursing staff, the senior consultants, and the physician associates because it's hard to settle into a new hospital with new rules. So I could find the money for the resident doctors. The taxpayer shouldn't pay for it. The NHS should pay for it. We can get rid of these DEI doctors. We can stop appraisal and revalidation. We're complete waste. So I'm appraised every single year, as I have been for the past 20 years. My appraiser gets paid about £700 each time he or she appraises me. Every single doctor in the country has an annual appraisal. This is all the post-shipment. We overreact to this.
We're just checking that you're not trying to kill everybody. But that's the thing. What we want is, as we know, this isn't stopping, killer nurses or failing doctors who have a terrible rate of success in their surgery. We need to be tackling where there is a problem and dealing with it quickly rather than worrying about the other cases. We've covered a lot of ground there. I have to say, realistically, West Streeting, the Health Secretary, is meeting BMA leaders. They're saying they're not going to move ground. As you say, the last set of strikes worked. We're going to have 5-day strikes starting next Friday. We're going to have more people dying. And bearing in mind, by the way, there will be people who just don't go to hospital at all that day. We won't know whether they... there's no record. They'll just say, well, I won't call because I know that there's a strike on. I won't go to doctors. And then those people will die. We don't know about all of those people. Realistically, more people are going to die if the strike goes ahead.
That's very unfortunate, and I don't support that at all. But maybe the blame is with the NHS for having this awful career structure.
Yeah, that's a very good
point.
Very,
very badly run system, which has got completely out of control. I'm not going on strike, so and a lot of doctors aren't. So there will be services available to people.
Yeah, OK. Thank you, Dr. Lawrence Girls. Appreciate that. Philip Ingram, that's a really interesting point in terms of the structure. Again, I'm not sure I accept all this bullying or whatever. I mean, I think, people being spoken to robustly, I don't think it's bullying. I think being a junior doctor is a tough job and they do get laughed at by the nurses. But usually, from what I can understand from both doctors and nurses who spoke to me, it's because they turn up like the big I am, thinking they know everything. And actually, that nurse who's been working for 30 years knows a damn sight more than them and saves their skin and saves patients on a daily basis from their terrible mistakes they have to learn on the job. But it is a very tough job. I think it should be well financially rewarded, but I think there should be a deal that in return for that you don't go on strike and you work a certain number of years in the NHS full stop. But it's fair arguments from Lawrence in terms of expecting people, and we know there are loads of GP vacancies, but they won't actually employ British GPs. But it's a fundamental, absolute abject failure of NHS management. It's always the management.
Yeah. It's a management failure, and I agree that doctors should be properly rewarded. They should be to encourage more coming through the training system. They shouldn't have to pay student loans and other things. That would encourage more to come in.
I don't think anyone should have to pay 100 grand's worth of student loans.
The same with nurses. That would incentivise people to come in, but give a return of service. But as part of the return of service and as part of being paid more, there should be it should be a protected career path in the same way that in the military you can't strike, the police you can't strike. Your doctors should not be allowed to strike and put the rest of us at risk.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to ask your thoughts on that. We've only got 15 minutes left. It's 12:45. We're going to go to a break in just a moment. Just to let you know, the German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, has arrived at number 10. He's signing a deal on defence and migration with the British Prime Minister. This involves the basically, it's not actually a crime in Germany currently for someone to basically aid and abet people who are planning to smuggle people, illegal migrants from another country to the UK, and indeed to basically sell them those large dinghies which they're getting on that should be about 20, but actually put 50 on. So they're signing that deal. Whether that makes any difference to anything, we shall see. The time is 12:46. Up next, we're going to be talking to someone who thinks that, yes, it's a jolly good idea that children, 16 and 17-year-olds, should be allowed to vote. You don't want to miss that. This is Talk.
First time we've even been given this information, the first time the public's even been told what this breakdown looks like, that 1 in 6 people who are claiming universal credit aren't British. And we are a very, very generous country and people, but it's not viable to do this. It's not sustainable and it's not affordable for us to pay for everybody who comes here on the basis that they're going to contribute and then either stops working or falls on hard times or whatever it might be. People like that, unfortunately, will need to go home.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 12:49 is the time. Philip Ingram is still with me, former senior military intelligence officer. Now, we've been very clear, haven't we, Philip? We do not think that this announcement today that 16 and 17-year-olds should be allowed to vote in elections is a good idea, mainly because they're kids and they shouldn't be allowed to vote because they're not adults, which seems to me to be a very basic logical argument. But
we've got a split society. We've got a society that's saying 16-year-olds are not mature enough to do a large number of things. Yet we're now saying that they are mature enough to do something that should only be the permit of adults. Are they going to change the definition of an adult?
Yeah, very good point. Well, let's put that to James Mathewson. He's a writer and political commentator, and quite some time ago was involved with the Labour Party, but not anymore. James Mathewson, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Julia.
Hello. I've been calling out saying, can someone who actually thinks it's a good idea, other than anyone in the Labour Party, get in touch? I'm delighted to say that you very kindly agreed to come on the show. Why do you think it's a good idea for children to be allowed to vote in general elections and decide who runs the country?
Well, we've got to be honest here. It's already happening. It's already the case in the devolved parliaments in Scotland and Wales. I'm up here in Edinburgh, and I've seen the impact of it in Edinburgh, and it works.
Yeah, how's that working out for everyone in Scotland and Wales? Not very well, judging by their stats.
What stats?
Well, I mean, the Labour government in Wales has got even worse waiting lists and records than England on the NHS. I mean, the Scottish government. Have you seen the state of Scottish schools lately?
Well, I mean, I don't think we can blame the Democrats.
No, these are devolved issues. Sturgeon, the SNP, they said education was their top priority. Scotland has fallen massively down the rankings on educational attainment under SNP. It's a devolved power, voted for by 16 and 17-year-olds.
Not exclusively.
No, but why do you're saying the evidence for voting at 16 and 17 across the UK is proven by it's been done in Scotland and Wales, but it's not worked out very well so far, has it? What evidence is it a good thing?
Yeah, the evidence I'm pointing to isn't the evidence of the democratic results of those elections. But, the ones I certainly disagree with the SNP being in power in Scotland, who've made a mess of everything. But yeah, the evidence I'm talking about, the involvement, the democratic process, and how that starts earlier. It shows that I believe it's up to 80% of those who are more likely to continue voting, as opposed to when they start between the age of 18 and 24. That it's more rooted in them. It takes more of a precedent for them and more importance.
There is some research that suggests if you get kids into this and sign them up at school already, then they're more likely to vote. However, there's been some big question marks about some of that research. Given that we know that younger people are much less likely to vote than older people, even at 18 when they're adults, wouldn't it be better that much older people, wouldn't it be better that we concentrate on getting 18, 19, 20, 23-year-olds voting and getting them into that habit, rather than lowering the voting age to children?
The simple thing for me is, and whether, because there's so many arguments for and against, and listen, I have sympathies with some of your arguments about that. However, the simple matter for me is, when I was 16, I left school and I worked full-time and I paid tax. And anybody who is working and who pays tax, in my book, has the right to decide how that tax is spent.
What about all the people who aren't working and aren't paying tax, who are to a 35-year-old? Should we take the vote away from them?
Yeah. What about all the adults who aren't?
Okay, so should we take the vote away from them? So only working people get to vote?
Take the vote away from anyone. It's a right. It's a right.
It's a right that adult citizens have.
Yeah, but it's when you join and when you start taking part in that democratic process. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about withdrawing it from anyone. Oh, no. The point of this is...
Your argument was that I was working and paying tax, but that's irrelevant to the right to vote.
No, it's not.
A child. Look, I know a girl who's been a child sort of actor, and she's been earning more money than most of us ever dream of since she was in primary school. Should she have got the vote then because she was working and paying tax?
No, but the point is, 16-year-olds
yes or no?
en masse can work and can pay tax.
No, most of them are still in full-time education or training.
They should be able to decide how that tax is spent. Other things like the age of consent as well. That is 16.
That is 16. However, the age of consent
you can be mature enough to decide what to do with your own body by that age.
Your government and the last government doesn't think.
Government.
Okay, you're quite right. The government doesn't think that 16-year-olds are mature enough to decide what they do with their own bodies, because it is illegal. It is illegal for you to buy alcohol, a vape, a cigarette when you are 16 years old. So it's illegal for you to drive a car at 16. It's only legal after 17. So it's illegal for you to get married. You can't even decide who you want to get married to at 16.
I certainly think there's a complete lack of consistency across the age rankings for things. I think a lot of people would agree with that a lot of it doesn't make sense.
Okay, if you're saying people can vote at 16, you're saying that people should be allowed to buy cigarettes at 16 again, and buy alcohol and drive and get married again?
I don't have the evidence for that. It's a health issue rather than a democratic issue, so I wouldn't feel qualified to talk about that.
No, wait a minute. But are you saying that a 16-year-old is mature enough to decide who should run the country, whether we should vote for someone who wants to go to war or end a war, or put our taxes up or take our taxes down, and decide all of those things, but they're not old enough to decide whether they can vape or whether they can have a pint of beer?
I didn't say that they're not old enough. I'm just saying I don't feel qualified to talk about it because it's a health issue, and I don't know.
It's not a health issue.
I don't know the statistics.
It's about body. It's about whether or not someone has the right to make decisions about their own body, which you're saying they do at 16 about having sex.
Well, in principle, yeah, I do believe that somebody has the right to decide what happens to their body at that age.
So you're allowed to have sex, but you're not allowed to buy a half pint or have a cigarette after sex.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying that lack of parity across the board doesn't really make sense to a lot of people. But I'm not gonna
it doesn't make
I'm not
sense.
going to advocate for a lower drinking age because I don't know what the damaging impact of that is because I'm not a statistician on that front.
But again, you also don't know what the damage and impact would be of people at 16 years old being indoctrinated by their lefty woke teachers.
I'm
really?
Indoctrinated. I don't
Aren't
think
they? The green stuff, the trans ideology, all of that stuff.
But the thing is, Julia, they're things you disagree with. They're things that the majority.
They're non-facts that are being pushed down children's throats every single. Do you have a child at school?
No.
No, I have a child at school. I've got lots of friends with children at school, and my audience will know what their children are being taught at school.
It's always anecdotal, though, isn't it? It's funny because
it's not anecdotal if you actually see the. Well, I know what the sex education is in schools because it's often printed and you can look at it.
Right, so what's the problem with the sex education in schools?
When you're teaching children, if you're, for instance, let's go to get way down. If you're teaching children, they may well be non-binary or born in the wrong body. Yeah. Then you're teaching children lies. We are having a lot of. No, we're not having a debate about that. My point is that when children are 16 and 17, they're either still at education or they've just come out of education, where they are being taught in a certain way. The reality is, the Labour Party want to reduce the age at which people can vote because they reckon 16 and 17-year-olds are going to vote for them.
Undoubtedly so. I mean, that's their motivation in doing it, 100%. But
that's gerrymandering.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
In which case, we shouldn't allow a government to do that? Then should we? We shouldn't allow them to fix the vote.
You've also got Keir Starmer, to segue onto another thing that I know you want to talk about, Julie. You've also got Keir Starmer trying to boot out MPs of his party.
He's not booting MPs out. He's simply suspending the whip from people who voted against the government.
Tony Blair didn't do that in his entire time as leader.
But he's entitled to do it.
Yeah, but he didn't, did he?
Yeah, but Keir Starmer's entitled to do it. Here's my thing. Do you think there's a risk, though, actually, for Keir Starmer, that this is actually going to backfire on him when a load of these people either vote for Green or Gaza parties or actually vote Reform, and actually Labour doesn't do well out of this?
Yeah, obviously. I think that's the impact of it. I just think Keir Starmer is continuing to dig a hole.
Okay.
And can't look around and see what everyone else is seeing.
OK, all right. We're going to have to leave it there. James Mathewson, writer, political commentator, thank you very much. Just a point about that. Angela Rayner's written a piece for The Times justifying voting at 16 and 17. She's saying by law they can get married and serve our country in the armed forces. Genuinely, no, they can't. The law was changed in 2023. You can't get married, even with your parents' permission, at 16 or 17. And you can't serve our country in the armed forces, can you, Philip Ingram, on the front line at all? So, again, the Deputy Prime Minister of this country doesn't even know the law of this country.
Yeah, junior soldiers only or apprentices you can't serve in the front line. And the other thing that James missed is tattoos. You can't get a tattoo until you're 18.
But you can have a vote.
But you can have a vote. That gets around all his health arguments.
Madness. Well, there are some other people I don't think should be allowed to vote. Some talk presenters. No, Ian Collins. Ian Collins joins us now.
Well, you're not wrong about that. I mean,
should we name them? Should we name names?